A framed photo of an old man sits on the table, a quiet reminder of the life he lived. This was the man who stepped up to raise him after his parents died. But now, Daichi Asakura lies in his messy room, feeling the heavy weight of everything he just lost. He just stares at the ceiling while the reality of the situation starts to sink in. He's gripping his phone with a totally blank stare, feeling like the funeral just ended, even though 10 whole days have already vanished into thin air. He looks at his screen and sees a rejection email from Kawamoto Corp, and he's so frustrated that he literally crushes the papers in his hand. He's just staring into space when a voice suddenly echoes in his head, calling his name. Suddenly, this voice starts blasting him with all these dark thoughts, telling him he's aiming way too high and needs to just settle for whatever he can get. The stress is totally piling. Feeling totally crushed, he buries his face in his pillow until he feels a tiny weight on his back and hears a soft meow. His cat is checking in on him, and he finally looks up with a little spark of life in his exhausted eyes. He realized moping was a total waste of time, so he grabbed a snack and got back to the job hunt while chilling with his cat, glad he wasn't actually all alone. Touching that familiar fur suddenly brought back a memory, and his eyes landed right on a small wooden box sitting on his bed. He reached for the box, remembering exactly what was inside, and when he popped the lid, he saw a bunch of old rings just like he thought. So he grabbed one right off its velvet cushion. He slides it onto his finger and is totally shocked when it fits him perfectly. Just as he was checking it out, his cat Nike pounced and bit down hard on the ring, making him yell at the cat to drop it. The second Nike bites the ring, a crazy flash of light swallows him whole, and suddenly his room is gone, replaced by massive mountains that make him think he's totally dreaming. As the light fades, he's left kneeling in the grass of a totally new world, clutching Nike, who's somehow turned into a weird red panda creature, and he just shouts. He tried to wrap his head around everything, remembering how he was just chilling in bed a minute ago. He felt totally normal, not even hungry or tired. But as he searched for anything, he totally freaked out when he saw the ring was gone, frantically checking his pockets and wondering if he'd dropped it or even swallowed it, while even his cat watched him struggle to find it. He finally stopped looking around like a total maniac. He was 100% sure that ring was locked onto his finger. There was no way it could have just fallen off by. His brain was working overtime, wondering if that weird thing in his room started all this, and even though he thought it was just a story at first, he suddenly remembered that survival guide book. He looked down at his bare feet on the weird grass and dirt, and that's when it finally hit him. This was actually real. Suddenly, a wild thought hits him. If this is actually another world, he's got to have some kind of OP cheat skill, like in the stories. So he throws his hand out and prays to, but nothing happened. And as he sat there in the middle of nowhere, the reality of it all finally hit him. He was totally 100% cooked. He sat there totally crushed while his cat Nike floated around, having a blast. And when he sighed that at least someone was having fun, the cat flew over and gave him a big lick on the cheek. He suddenly freaked out and scrambled back, staring at the cat and wondering when it learned to fly, as a wild thought hit him. Was Nike actually the one who got those insane powers? He crashed onto the grassy hill, totally defeated, and mumbled that there was just no way he could survive in a place like this. But as he's lying there, a wild thought hits him. If Nike really has special powers, there's still hope. He just needs to figure out what they are. And the second he makes up his mind, a glowing screen pops up right in front of his face. His eyes went wide as he finally realized what was actually going down. He stared at the screen and realized he finally had the appraisal skill. It turns out this was his personal status window, which is why it didn't pop up when he tried to check on Nike earlier. He tested his new skill on his cat Nike and was shocked when a status screen showed the cat, also named Asakura, could use all 4 spirit magics: earth, wind, fire, and water. He knows he's got to grind his appraisal skill to the max, and since Japan is out of the picture, he and Nike have to team up to survive. Honestly, he's just hyped they both scored such insane powers. Now that he's totally fired up, he heads into the thick woods where the trees are so massive they make him look like a total ant. He walks up to a massive tree and taps the bark to trigger his appraisal. And instantly, a wall of info pops up, showing it's a 40-meter-tall medicinal tree. Perfect. The results were pretty mid, so he decides to test his next power by grabbing Nike and firing up his unique skill, Trader. A massive wave of digital data and glitchy numbers slams into him, making his eyes go wide in total shock. He stumbles back and grabs his head as a massive wave of info hits him, realizing it's his traitor power at work. And he lets out a shout because it's just so overwhelming. His sudden freak-out totally scares Nike, who hisses and jumps right out of his arms, landing on the floor in a panic, while Daichi quickly says sorry for the scare. The little cat watches as Daichi says sorry for snapping earlier, telling it to just stay put and watch him with a look of total determination. He focuses his energy, and with a massive crash, an entire tree gets ripped out of the earth and vanishes in a bright flash of light. He stares at the empty spot in total shock, sweat dripping down his face while his item box screen glows right next to it. Suddenly, he spots this massive fox creature that looks totally lost, and he's shocked by how surprisingly cute it actually is. Wait, the prompt says, rewrite the following line. He makes another tree vanish in a blink to show off, and the monster hisses as it backs away, totally freaked out by his insane power. He quickly says sorry to the terrified animal with the puffed-up tail, explaining he was just testing his new skill and asking it to chill out. He points right at his item box screen to show the tree icon, proving that's exactly where he stashed the whole thing. He forgets the forest and looks down at his bare feet, but then a menu pops up, letting him trade items for points, so he taps it to sell his old, busted shoes. Right then, his shoes just vanish into thin air. His screen updates to show he's got 30,200 points now, with a little shoe icon popping up. He stands there. Suddenly, a brand new shoe pops into his hand with a soft hum, and he just stares at it in total shock, realizing his crazy idea actually worked. The shock wears off, and he's freaking out with joy because he knows this traitor skill is a total jackpot that lets him do whatever he wants. While he laces up his new kicks, his brain is going a mile a minute, thinking about what this means. This crazy power is the only way he's gonna stay alive. He figures out that realization gets him totally fired up, so he turns back to the forest and zaps a massive twisted tree straight into his inventory with a burst of power. His screen is blowing up with icons as he grabs everything in sight, instantly sucking up a giant tree and a massive boulder to add to his huge loot pile. He even bought an electric chainsaw just to see how far he could push his powers. And even after cramming in a mountain of supplies, his item box still felt like it had endless space. Just as he started thinking about grabbing a bite, his cat Nike suddenly let out a terrifying hiss, making him jump and spin around to see what was wrong. We finally see why the cat is so scared when a massive black tiger steps out of the trees and towers over them. He stared at the beast and realized with a jolt of fear that even the meanest grizzly bear would look like a total pushover compared to this monster. He tried to use his storage power right away, but it totally failed because he can only store plants, not living things. The tiger let out a massive roar that sent him stumbling back in total panic, his mind racing for a plan as he realized he didn't have a single weapon to defend himself or even scare the beast off. He forced himself to chill out, knowing his only shot was to hit first and hit hard. The tiger was still pretty far away. He remembered his trader skill worked up to 100 meters for he kicks off his plan by announcing he's literally going to store the ground itself. The earth under the black tiger vanishes instantly, sending the beast falling down in total shock. His fox, as the beast falls, he spawns a huge shipping container in the pit to trap the tiger, then instantly floods it with freezing liquid nitrogen and tells the monster it's game over as it lets out. Out of nowhere, a massive metal lid slams shut with a loud bang, trapping the monster inside. The forest finally goes quiet, and a totally wiped-out Daichi covers his eyes, whispering that he actually pulled it off, before turning to Nike the cat and that jumpy fox creature with a tired grin to ask how his plan worked out. And while Nike stays chill, the fox is literally baring its teeth because it's so freaked out. Daichi Asakura is totally frozen as a snarling wolf beast and a massive scarred tiger surround him, muttering to himself that this nightmare can't be real while the tiger stalks right toward him. Suddenly, his cat Nike jumps in front of him with a mean hiss, blasting a bunch of water bullets with crazy power. Water bullets slam into the black tiger, but the monster doesn't even flinch as it lunges straight through the spray. He watches his attack fail and starts to freak out, realizing he needs a weapon fast. He wonders if this is Nike's spirit magic, because those shots looked like they could pierce armor, but his brain is going a mile a minute since he's got no weapons, but then he spots a massive flat item in his inventory and realizes it's the perfect shield to save his life. He locks in, knowing there's absolutely no way out. If he doesn't throw down right now, it's game over. As the tiger jumps, everything suddenly slows down, and he takes advantage of the opening and launches a massive kick, slamming that tatama mat right into the charging beast's face with a huge blast. He stands tall as the winner, with that massive tiger totally wrecked in the water right in front of him. A tiny rock bounces near his head, but that's nothing compared to the insane. Now that the danger's gone, the exhaustion finally hits him and his stomach starts screaming for food. He shakes off the exhaustion and looks toward the sunny mountains, knowing it's finally time to figure out his next move. His brain is working overtime as he checks his to-do list. Find food, hide the evidence of the fight, and prep his gear. He quickly looks over his bag, water. Once he's all set, he looks down at a weird book-shaped gadget called Z-Face and stops to really think about it. The giant fox pops back up to grab a snack, and Daichi tells Nike it's time to move, using his insane trader skill to zoom in on a far-off caravan through a circular lens. Man, this ability is seriously broken. The camera pans up to the massive open sky, giving us one last peaceful second before he kicks off his big plan. He walked right up to a small group of travelers as they moved their caravan through the hills. Just as he gets close, one of the hooded guys turns around with a massive smile to say what's up, and his cat Nike is even peeking out from his jacket. He tried to be super friendly, but the group wasn't falling for it and kept a close eye on him. One girl peeked out from her hood and was shocked to see it. As they keep talking across the open fields, one of the girls on her horse points out that seeing a cat around here is actually super rare, because I should stick to the spelling provided. He agreed, saying he's seen plenty of cats around, but none with fur as long as Nike's. Then he introduced himself. The younger traveler suddenly whips off her hood with a massive grin, introducing herself as Alicia Heartland. Daiichi is totally caught off guard and starts blushing, thinking she's exactly his type from high school, while Alicia is already falling in love with Nike and asking to pet her. The blonde lady jumped in right away, scolding Alicia for being so reckless. Then she turned to Daiichi with a serious look and apologized for her friend being so blunt. She asked him again, even louder. He pulls out a weird tube and claims it's a magic bag. And suddenly a massive beam of light blasts out and scares the life out of Alicia and her friend. But Alicia notices something's... He's low-key celebrating because his hunch was spot on, especially since seeing magic on his status screen made him figure these items had to be real. Alicia is totally geeking out over how cool the device is, but her friend realizes it's not magic at all, so Daiichi sets it on a rock and tells them to check it out for themselves. He asks if they're guarding the caravan, secretly thinking that blonde lady is totally terrifying, and asks to tag along to the next town so he can meet their boss. The two girls start whispering, with Alicia arguing that the guy seems totally chill and wondering why her friend is being so paranoid. But the blonde girl just tells her she's way too trusting. She turns her focus back to Daiichi, noticing his hands are way too soft for a fighter, so she just hands his useless weapons back and tells him he can hold on to them if it makes him feel better. He's totally busted, so he just laughs nervously since she's still clueless, but the blonde woman just keeps staring him down with a stone-cold face. The blonde lady just stayed quiet and watched while her friend stepped up with a big smile. This girl, Karina, offered to ask the caravan leader if Daiichi could travel with them. Daiichi. Karina hears the noise and turns instantly, her eyes lighting up as she shouts about how adorable the little guy is, and then the cat leaps right off Daiichi's shoulder and into her waiting hands. The chill vibes died instantly when the blonde lady's voice turned cold. She agreed to lead him to the boss, but only if he followed one major rule. He had to stay glued to her side. She pointed right at the ground to remind him of the 1-meter rule, and Daiichi just nodded because he knew she wasn't playing around. He tried to act casual and talk like his usual self, figuring it was totally fine since they were around the same age. The blonde lady totally caught his change in tone and let him talk, but she warned him not to try anything sneaky. And when Daiichi asked if he really looked that shady, she just gave him a... Just as they were about to head out, the vibe between the two girls totally changed, and they shared a silent look as they sat on their horses, ready to go. The next morning, the whole crew was ready to hit the road with their wagons packed tight and the horses all geared up for the trip. In the middle of all the chaos, Daiichi just watched with a worried look, finally realizing how massive this whole plan really was. Suddenly, a scary-looking dude walked right up to him and cut him off, staring Daiichi down to confirm he was the one heading to Caravan with them. The guy introduces himself as Klaus Bertram, the leader of the caravan and the big boss of the Bertram Trading Company, so Daiichi tells him his name is Daiichi Asakura. Klaus called Daiichi out for being way too bold and asked what he'd give in return, so Daiichi admitted he didn't realize how powerful the Bertram Trading Company was, but swore he was going to give it everything he's got. He whipped out a tiny glowing pouch and offered to sell the loot inside for exactly what it cost him. Klaus was totally floored by the offer, and his jaw dropped when he grabbed the pouch and realized it was worth way more than he ever expected. He stared at Daiichi, wondering if he was being super nice or just totally clueless about the item's price, and Daiichi admitted he actually had no idea what it was worth in this country. He was totally hooked now, narrowing his eyes as he started to figure things out. The guy admitted that merchants usually lie to make a buck, but he promised he was being totally real explaining that an item's price changes depending on where you sell it. Since they grow this stuff, the merchant was totally sold and admitted he couldn't have put it better himself, so Daichi thanked him while secretly giving props to his grandpa's wisdom, feeling like this whole deal was finally going his way. He opened his hand to show off some peppercorns and told Klaus straight up that while they're worth a bit back home, they're worth a massive fortune here. Laos explained that pepper is basically a luxury for the ultra-rich because it's all imported, and since no one on the entire continent can actually grow it, the price is absolutely insane. Suddenly, his voice got super aggressive as he called Daichi out, saying there's no way a guy from another continent has a permit to sell pepper here. And it hit Daichi hard that Blaus rubs his chin and admits that even though Daichi's clothes and vibes are super weird, he never guessed he was from a whole different continent. So he tells him to keep it a secret. He thanks the merchant for being so cool about the whole thing, and Alicia just puts a finger to her lips, showing she's got his secret covered. Klaus says he's going to get the payment ready, but then he asks if Daichi would be down to take something other than just cash. Daichi jumps at the chance and makes a wild move, telling Klaus he wants to be a merchant in this land, but since he's an outsider, he doesn't want money. The old merchant starts cracking up at the kid's guts, calling him way too trusting. But then Klaus gets serious and says he's just got a perfect eye for reading people. He's still pushing hard to turn Daichi into a real merchant, but since they're running a bit low on pepper, he holds up his fingers and asks exactly how much more he... 4 more sacks of peppercorns drop to the ground, and Klaus nods because he's impressed, while Daichi realizes this merchant is the real deal and is definitely someone they can trust. He breaks down his logic using some old advice from his grandpa about always blowing away a partner's expectations, though he admits he might have actually just read that in a book somewhere. Whilst Bertram calls the blonde girl Karina and then tells an old guy named Lloyd to go grab the pepper, who just bows and says, "On it, sir." Then Klaus hit Karina with another favor, asking her to protect Alicia while also getting Mr. Asakura to the town of Cameroon. And after Alicia gave her okay, both girls were totally down for. Daichi flashed a massive grin and told them he was super hyped to finally travel with both of them. As the trio started walking away from the camp, Alicia and Karina told him they were super hyped to get this journey started. Clutching his cat, Daichi asks where they're going, and Karina explains they have to report everything to her boss, the captain of the guards. He jumped in and told them to just call him Daichi since he's not into formal stuff, saying he'd way rather they just be friends, which totally caught Alicia off guard. He introduces his partner, a tiny cat named Nike, and Alicia is totally caught off guard, shouting about how he's just a super cute and fluffy kitty. She reaches for the cat, but it starts sliding away, making Daichi freak out as he loses his grip, while Alicia just holds onto Nike's paws and laughs at how cute the poor thing looks. He quickly covers her hand with his to steady her grip so the cat doesn't fall. He tells her she's actually hugging Nike and he's just Daichi, making Alicia look up at him with a huge blush and a total sparkle in her eyes. He catches her reaction and leans in close to ask if she's doing okay. He finally speaks up and suggests they go see the guard captain, telling her she can keep holding Nike, which makes a super flustered Alicia agree and stutter that she's calling him Daichi from... She looks down and holds onto Nike all shy, while he stands right next to her with a huge grin on his face. As they kept moving, Daichi's cat Nike was totally losing it, eyes wide with shock at all the crazy new sights and sounds. The cat's freaking out because right in front of him is a massive camp packed with tents and armed guards patrolling under a gloomy sky. Klaus sat at a table inside his tent, looking super serious. Then he turned to Lloyd and asked what he really thought about the new kid. Lloyd started sizing the guy up and noticed his hands were way too clean for someone from another land. So since he knew all the local customs, Lloyd figured he was definitely a rich kid who grew up with a fancy education. He figured Daichi was either a rich merchant's kid or some clueless noble who didn't know how the real world worked, because giving away something that valuable for free was just straight up insane. House thought it over and shared his take, saying this kid was destined for greatness because an item box in such perfect condition is basically a super rare treasure. An item box is a super rare skill that's basically a gift from the gods. It lets you open up a secret pocket dimension to stash all your gear. The more magic power you have, he kept breaking it down, showing how Daichi's power is way different from a regular magic bag. A magic pouch is okay, but an item box is way more high-tech. Klaus was sure Daichi's item box was packed with legendary loot, figuring that having such an OP skill was the only reason a kid that young had the guts to survive crossing the ocean. Lloyd remembered Daichi faking that pepper trick, but Klaus didn't care and told his crew to treat the kid like a total VIP, since he has secrets from a world they've... The word spread fast that everyone from the company to the guards had to show Daichi some serious respect. And out in the field, he listened closely and squeezed his fist tight, simply saying, "Understood," as he locked in his next move. Just as he gets ready to move, his giant fox buddy lets out a huge yawn while packing some crazy strong skills. And now, the epic journey of this boy and his new partner is finally kicking off. Daichi, Alicia, and Karina gear up at the super busy camp before heading off to meet the escort captain. While they're walking through the camp, Daichi spots a merchant named Lloyd flexing a fancy glass cup and bragging about his connections. But Daichi realizes that even though glass is super rare here, under the glowing moon, Alicia turns around and calls out to her blonde friend, Ms. Karina. Suddenly, a girl named Colette walks up and asks for help starting a fire, but Karina says she can't because she's busy giving a guest a tour. Since Mr. Asakura is cool with it, Daichi is totally down and asks to watch, but he's low-key confused why she's even asking him unless she's... Colette thanks her and says flint is a total pain to use, so Karina just holds her hand over the wood and lets out a quick blast of energy. The wood bursts into flames instantly, and Daichi is totally shocked to see her using fire spirit magic. He asks if she always helps out like this, but Karina just says she only does it when her... Daichi hung on every word, as Alicia explained that if you can't use fire magic, you just use flint. But you can still use other spells or cool magic items, and he just nodded as he started wondering if any mage could just use any magic item as long as they had mana. But Alicia turned to him with her hair blowing in the wind and said, "It's way more." She looked totally serious as she explained that magic basically decides your whole future, from the job you get to how you live, because people with powers always get picked first. If you didn't have powers, you were basically stuck. You couldn't even use basic tech, let alone find a way to make money. This reality check hit Daichi hard, flashing him back to his old life where he was stuck in his room, staring at a job rejection from Kawakato Corp while his grandpa's photo sat on the desk. Suddenly, all the bad memories hit him at once. The failed job interviews, the news about how hard life is for people his age, and the insane pressure of all his rivals. He froze and slapped a hand over his mouth, realizing he'd just blurted that out loud. But Colette just looked up from her gear with a kind smile and told him it was totally fine, since she's used to hearing it by now. She says that even though she can't use magic, she's got an awesome job where everyone is super nice and always helps her out. Looking totally calm, She realizes she's actually super lucky with how things turned out. Her words hit Daichi hard, making him realize his plan to just get rich as a merchant was totally selfish when he could be using his powers to help everyone who doesn't have magic. A wild new goal pops into his head, and he thinks flipping the whole world's rules upside down sounds like a total blast. He's planning to bring in Earth tech so regular people can finally stand on equal ground with magic users, and he knows they'll be his absolute best customers. He's finally ready to act, so he turns to Colette and shows her he's actually got a tool to start a fire. Alicia and Karina's eyes are glued to the object, but Alicia realizes it isn't magic at all, while Colette thinks it looks as clear as jam. She panics and fumbles the lighter, and her friends just watch in total shock as it clatters onto the ground. He calmly picks it up and tells her not to stress, explaining that the gear is way tougher than it looks, and he won't even be mad if she breaks a couple of them. She grabs the tool and nervously flicks the wheel, and with a quick click, a flame pops up that sets the woodpile on fire instantly. In just a few seconds, the fire is totally blazing and roaring with heat. She stares at the tiny gadget in her hand, looking totally blown away as she whispers about how awesome this thing is. Daichi explains his big dream is to give everyone tools that work even without magic, and Colette is totally hooked, thinking his home sounds like a dream and that he's just a merchant from another land. She flashes him a huge, supportive smile and tells him that with products this awesome, he's definitely going to make it big. Colette is totally shocked when Daichi hands her the lighter to say thanks and sorry for bothering her, so she takes it and thanks him 1,000,000 times. He tells everyone they're heading out and starts walking away with Alicia and Karina, but Colette suddenly yells for them to wait up. She rushes over, panicking that she can't take something so expensive, but they just chills her out by saying it's actually super cheap. Right in the middle of everything, Alicia turns to Karina and asks her what she's even doing. Karina says they're off to meet the captain, but suddenly a massive guy with a gnarly scar on his face steps up and asks if they're looking for him. Daichi is totally floored by how huge the dude is, and Karina introduces him as Captain Jeffrey of the escort party, while telling the captain that Daichi is the merchant Mr. Bertram was doing business with. The captain gives a quick nod, confirming he's the one guarding the Bertram Trading Company on their way to the next town. Jeffrey asks if he's got to watch over both Alicia and Daichi, and Karina confirms it, saying the boss wants the customer taken care of, which totally makes Daichi cringe, since he feels like, as the sun sets, he's chilling with his new squad between the tents when Captain Jeffrey offers him a drink, but Daichi politely turns it down. Somewhere else, Colette stops what she's doing, her face going totally pale as she realizes something and mutters, "Wait." An empty bowl and cup sit on the ground, showing that the long day is finally over. Night hits the camp, and the tents look super sharp against the starry sky. Inside, Daichi is wide awake on his bedroll with his hands behind his head while his cat Nike is just chilling on his chest. Lish's voice snaps him out of his thoughts to see if he's still awake, and he realizes he might have gone too far since everyone was more hyped about his shiny gem-like case than what it actually does. He checks his watch and sees it's 8:41 p.m., just as Alicia calls out from outside the tent, apologizing for the late visit but saying the president needs to talk, so he tells her he'll be ready right away. He gets ready for the secret meeting and takes off his watch just in case, using a fake excuse about bad pepper to explain why he's gone. He steps out of his tent into a super lively camp where merchants and guards are all laughing around a massive bonfire. Alicia points out how awesome the vibes are, and Daichi just gives a quiet nod. He walks up to this huge, fancy tent and lets them know he's arrived, finding Klaus Bertram inside, waving him in to sit down right next to Alicia and the old man. Klaus sits down and apologizes for the late hour while sticking to his fake story, but Daiichi immediately asks if the pepper is bad and offers to replace it right away. The boss tells him he's wrong and that the pepper is actually top tier, but then he taps a folded note on the table and reveals the real reason they're meeting. Daiichi spots the item and realizes it's the lighter he gave Colette, but he's not trying to take it back. He just needs to make sure of something. We finally see why Klaus is so sketched out. Colette actually came to him with that lighter earlier, saying someone asked her how to use it, even though she admitted she had no clue what it even was. He explains that Daiichi has no clue how much that item is actually worth, which totally blows his mind since he thought he was just selling a regular household object. Back in Daiichi's world, this stuff is super common, but here it's a massive luxury for the rich and powerful, making it worth a literal fortune. He explains that the lighter case is special because even people without magic can use it, making it worth way more than normal items, while Daiichi wonders if it's actually more than just a tool. Klaus compares the case to high-grade glass, which totally shocks Daiichi, but then he explains that even if it's not a diamond, the case itself is still worth a fortune. He gets super serious and warns them that if a bunch of these items hit the market, people will definitely try to sell them to the rich and powerful for a massive payday. The warning hits Daiichi hard, and he covers his mouth in shock as he realizes that selling stuff from his world without a plan is just asking for a total disaster. After realizing how dangerous things really are, he sits down with Klaus and Alicia, admits he totally messed up, promises to help their business, and asks what the plan is. He knows they can't just ignore the whole lighter situation, so Klaus starts thinking hard about what to do next, because even though these things would sell like crazy, they can't let them totally. While they're talking strategy, Alicia points to the glass bottle in her hand and says it's actually a luxury item for rich people, leaving him shocked that such a basic object is worth a fortune. To prove his point, he pulls out a shiny, metallic rose that looks so perfect it's insane, leaving Klaus and Alicia totally speechless, while Daiichi low-key wonders if he went overboard again. The silence snaps as Klaus panics and yells for him to wait. Alicia is totally stunned, and right then, Karina draws her sword with a deadly look in her eyes. She narrows her eyes and locks onto the threat, refusing to look away for even a second. In a total blur, Karina's blade is pressed right against Daiichi's throat, but Klaus quickly shouts her name and tells her it's okay since he just lost his cool, so she puts her sword away and mumbles an apology. Laos apologizes for snapping, and while Daiichi says it's all good, he's actually stunned by how fast Karina zipped into the tent, realizing she's dead serious about staying within a meter of him at all times. He smirked because they had no clue he was actually just frozen in shock, and while Klaus thought Alicia was a total boss for not flinching at a sword, she was actually freaking out because Daiichi, Klaus saw how chill he looked and told him they should keep talking with Karina, but as the bodyguard stepped up, Daiichi secretly admitted he was totally freaking out. The president turned to his bodyguard Karina and told her to stay alert, and she just gave him a serious nod to show she was totally on it. While everyone was distracted, Daiichi showed off the metal rose again and revealed it was actually a super expensive glass sculpture worth way more than any cheap jewel, leaving Klaus totally speechless. He was totally blown away by this massive, shiny jewel, stuttering that he couldn't believe it was actually made of glass, while Alicia just nodded and said it looked super pretty. Daiichi pulls even more stuff out of his bag, laying out a glass butterfly, a tiny bell, and some weird tubes that all sparkle like crazy under the light. Laos stared at the collection with sweat dripping down his face, totally hooked as he whispered that this glass was on a whole other level. He listened closely as Daichi explained his plan to make bank-selling glass. And even though the old man noticed the lighter case was made of something else, he knew people would pay a fortune for it alone. Daichi looked super confident as he dropped the big secret of his plan. He was going to throw in a free lighter to make it all work. He breaks down the master plan to Klaus. First, he'll give the lighters away for free with his expensive glassware, and once the rich nobles realize how useful they are, he'll have a massive new market ready to go. Alicia Heartland watched from the side and said the plan wasn't great, but since it was their only shot, Klaus gave the green light to start. Daichi asked one last time if they were officially a team, and Alicia didn't hesitate for a second, telling him she was hyped to work together. With the deal finally locked in, he and Klaus Bertram shook hands to make their new partnership official. He says sorry for the crazy scene earlier and insists it's his fault, explaining that Karina was just doing her job while he and the president totally freaked out and started yelling, but Alicia says she's fine, but she looks totally miserable, and the blonde girl next to her is just as bummed out. So when Alicia starts to speak but trails off, Daichi sees she's totally stressed and jumps into action. He holds out his cat, and the little guy lets out a cute meow. Alicia's sadness disappears instantly as she pulls He asks his cat if it likes seeing Alicia's happy face, feeling totally smug because she cheered up exactly like he planned. It was honestly way too easy. Alicia's mood totally flips as she gives him a massive blushing smile, points to her cheeks, and playfully asks him how she looks. The blonde lady is totally over this scene, and while Alicia is blushing and telling him to stop, Daichi just gives a big thumbs up and tells her she looks super cute when she's shy. He stops joking around and scans the dark camp, telling Alicia that people are giving him creepy vibes while a bunch of eyes watch them from the shadows. He asks Karina if the others want his lighters too, but she tells him it's way deeper than that because they're all dying to know who he actually is. She says everyone is freaking out over him giving Miss Colette a lighter, and now the rumors are going wild. People think he's either a secret prince on the run, a rich merchant's kid, or a noble who gave up his title for a lost love. Alicia hears the crazy rumors and jokes about how wild everyone's imagination is, while Daichi nods in agreement, and Karina just watches them both react. Suddenly, a guy in overalls bursts out of the woods screaming for help, gasping that a pack of massive king apes is coming and they're all totally trapped. Karina jumps in front of Daichi and Alicia to shield them, telling them to stay close, just as these massive king apes crawl out of the dark forest with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. A scream rings out as a group of travelers gets totally jumped by these vicious king apes, and from a safe distance, Daichi, Alicia, and another girl watch the whole disaster go down with serious looks on their faces. As soon as the attack hits, a scarred-up commander screams at his troops to get into a massive beast-blocking formation, and everyone instantly rushes into position. The soldiers quickly lock their shields and point their spears at the enemy, while Daichi asks a guy with a goatee about the monsters, who tells him that king apes are huge, dumb, and the defense holds firm. And Karina tells Daichi she's got both him and Alicia covered, but Daichi tells her to just focus on Alicia, since he can totally handle things on his own. He turns to Alicia and asks if she can use non-elemental magic to boost her strength, thinking that if it can do stuff like that, it's actually way more useful than he thought. Alicia holds on to Daichi's cat and says she's ready, so Daichi drops his big theory. Since the apes and guards use the same power system, the only way to get stronger is with better gear, and just as his hand starts glowing with the idea of making magic weapons, the archer screams that the apes are charging. These massive king apes slam into the shield wall with insane power, their screams echoing everywhere. And just as the line starts to buckle, the scarred commander yells for everyone to let their weapons fly. His archers let a massive wave of arrows fly at the jumping king apes, and watching from above, Daichi was sure they were stuck in midair with no way to dodge. His confidence was totally crushed in a split second. The arrow hit the king ape's thick fur and just bounced right off like it was nothing. Daichi couldn't believe his eyes when, suddenly, a massive wave of magic exploded from the caravan and swallowed the king apes, leaving them screaming as they got caught in the fire. The magic light finally fades, and that scarred commander is still standing tall with a super serious look on his face, while his soldiers brace themselves to hold the line against the rest of those monsters. Daichi was totally stressed watching the defense, but Alicia just gave him a chill look and promised the guards were fine because they could handle weak attacks like this easily. Her confidence gets put to the test right away when a scout suddenly screams out a warning. Over a dozen of King Apri's reinforcements are pouring out of the southern woods, but the commander, he decided to hold back since he didn't want to show off his powers yet. So he told his cat, Nike, to stay hidden and not use any magic this time. Instead, he watched as Karina noticed the king's apes were acting totally freaked out, so she sent Alicia to scout the southern forest for danger, and she moved out immediately. Before they could even get ready, the monsters were already on them, moving insanely fast. And it hit him right then. They were way too close and way too quick. So he needed. Monsters swarmed the place, and while Karina stood her ground ready to scrap, Alicia was totally frozen with fear as the apes closed in on her. He spotted a fresh wave of enemies swarming in from the eastern meadows and screamed at Karina to watch her back. But that shout put a huge target on his head as a massive king ape broke. That massive fist smashed the ground right where he was standing, and the insane force sent him flying through the air. He's spinning through the air when he spots another ape diving straight for a helpless Alicia, so he screams her name to warn her. He slammed into the ground, and Alicia screamed his name in a total panic. But even with a bloody nose and bruises, he pushed himself up just to check if she was okay and tell her he was doing fine. He scrambled back up with help from Alicia and the blonde girl, shouting that they had to bail. But his eyes went wide when he saw two more king apes charging right for them. Before he could even move, one of the bees slammed a giant fist down. He shoved the girls out of the way and tanked the whole hit himself. The blow was so insane, it sent. He gets tossed aside, leaving Alicia totally wide open. And she screams in terror as the other king ape lunges forward with its massive jaws ready to snap her up. She screamed in terror while Karina desperately called for Mr. Asakura, but Daichi forced himself off the ground with a look of pure grit, swearing he wasn't going down that easily. He locked in as he remembered Alicia telling him he could use non-elemental magic like physical buffs and enchanted gear, and suddenly it all clicked. This was the power he was tapping into. He checked himself over as a weird thought popped into his head. That giant ape was moving in total slow motion, just like it did earlier. He flexed his hand and realized that even after taking that, he flashed a confident smirk as he finally figured out his power, and as he gripped his sword, a massive energy surge told him it was time to totally wreck the guys attacking him. He was totally blown away by the feeling, because even though King Abe's claws slashed his back, it felt as weak as poking a fork into a cake, and he realized his physical buffs. Feeling super hyped, he activated his power-up and shouted to Karina that he's got her back before charging the beast at insane speeds. He jammed his knife deep into the king ape's side. But even though the beast roared in pain, Daichi realized his blade was way too short to reach the heart right as the monster started thrashing like crazy. The ape went totally wild, sending both him and Karina stumbling back as he muttered a quick, "Oops," completely caught off guard. Just as she slipped up, the king ape landed a huge punch that sent Karina flying while Daichi watched in total shock. She slammed into a tree, blood spraying across her face, while the beast just stood there, staring her down. Even with blood dripping down her face, she didn't look hurt at all. She just looked totally lethal, and seeing her like that made Daichi's heart skip a beat as he started to. He gets blasted back and slams into the dirt, making Alicia and the blonde warrior scream his name in total panic as they watch him go down. Even after taking that massive hit, he just lays there clutching his cat with a weak smile and a thumbs up, asking if everyone else is all right. He's acting like his wounds are no big deal, but the girls are totally fed up. The blonde warrior clutches her hurt arm and snaps that he's the one who needs help. Daichi sits up and asks how the defense is holding, and the blonde warrior tells him they're finally winning, but she shuts him down the moment he tries to help, reminding him she stares him down with such intense determination that he's left totally speechless and knows she isn't backing down. Suddenly, he spots something moving nearby and watches as a hand sets a glowing object right onto a pile of sticks. While he watches the prep, the blonde warrior tells him the enemy's sneak attack totally failed, and they're about to give up, leaving Daichi shocked that these guys were even smart enough to try. He watched from high up as those screaming monkey monsters were finally pushed back from the walls. Karina turned around with a smug grin, pointing at the retreating crowd and asking if he finally saw that she was right. But he was totally spaced out, thinking about something else entirely. His face basically started sparkling when he realized she looked way cuter without all that gross battle blood on her. Alicia just stood behind him. She went from confused to totally worried as she stepped closer to check his hand. And that's when he finally looked down and realized his palm was covered in blood. Before he could even move, she reached out and grabbed his hand to get a closer look. He jumped when that freezing cold cloth hit his skin, shouting that he could totally take care of it himself. Alicia wasn't backing down, and even though her face was turning bright red, she insisted on doing at least this one thing for him. As she carefully fixed up his hand, Daichi let out a happy little sigh, and his whole face turned bright red from all the attention. He looked up at her as it finally clicked, asking if she could use water spirit magic, and the question totally caught her off guard. She was totally stunned by what he said, and just as he started worrying he'd messed up, Karina jumped in and told him he actually nailed it. One line out. If the input has multiple sentences, should I output multiple sentences? Asterisk input. 1. He launched into an explanation clarifying the distinction between the two types of. Alicia was totally blown away by how much he knew and asked how he caught her using spirit magic. So he just explained that spirit magic is way more powerful than basic elemental stuff. He started breaking down the rules from his hometown. Back there, spirit magic is way more legendary than basic elemental stuff. He made a huge deal out of explaining why. Apparently, Alicia and Karina just gave him a massive really look, but he didn't even care, claiming it's just better to assume everyone uses spirit magic right from the get-go. Karina explains that spirit magic is insanely rare, with only 20 users in the whole country and less than 100 on the entire continent, which shocks Daichi since it's even rarer back home, leaving his cat looking super confused. Alicia hits him with a smug grin and teases him for not knowing the basics before starting his business. But Daichi doesn't let it get to him and just asks them to teach him while they're on the move. He flashes them a massive, thankful grin, and while Alicia is super hyped to help, Karina just sighs and admits they're pretty much stuck doing it. He gets way too hyped and vows to make his future shop massive with a statue of the girls inside. But Alicia and Karina shut that weird idea down immediately. Their talk gets cut short when a group of soldiers nearby lets out a massive victory roar, waving their weapons high in the air. Karina checks out the aftermath and says the fight's over, so Daishi instantly suggests they go help the soldiers and patch up their wounds. She looks down at the beat-up and exhausted soldiers. She wonders out loud why those king apes were even hunting them down. She has a pretty good guess, but they'll need to ask the Daiichi realizes just how crazy rare spirit magic actually is. So he comes up with a plan. Whenever Nike uses its powers, he'll just tell everyone it's his own elemental magic. Standing there with Alicia and Karina under the night sky, he's totally lost in thought until he finally realizes the truth. It hits him hard that staying alive in this world is no joke. Even Daiichi Asakura flashes a big grin and a thumbs up, asking her if she's doing okay. Alicia Heartland peeks over her blankets, staring back with her eyes wide in total shock. He pulls the blankets up tight, weirded out by the look on his face. The memory hits her like a truck. She'd never seen anyone kick a massive king ape without a weapon before, but the craziest part was that he was actually smiling the whole time. She was totally confused, wondering why Daichi was even there, and even weirder, why he had that smile on his face. She remembers her grandma telling her about legendary magic gear that could take a hit from a massive king ape without even getting a scratch, making it feel just like one of those old fairy tales. Lying in bed next to Karina, Alicia realizes he's basically a real-life knight, straight out of her favorite stories. She figures that if Daichi was a real knight, he wouldn't have been scared of her spirit magic. But the thought is so embarrassing, she just shakes her head to shut it down. She pictures him with a massive, happy smile, and it's a total 180 from all the miserable people she's seen before. She just can't get that image out of her head, lying wide awake in her tent while the rest of the camp finally goes quiet. The next morning, right as they're about to head out, the blonde lady totally loses it and screams at Daichi because she can't believe he doesn't know how to ride a horse. A long line of horse carriages is sitting there, totally ready to head out for the camp. Alicia points out they're in a super high-end luxury coach, but Daichi is still complaining that the ride is totally uncomfortable. He tells the frustrated girl he didn't say he couldn't ride a horse, just that he's never tried. And now he's actually wondering if he can pull it off. He caught everyone staring at him from across the room and asked the blonde lady if they even knew he was a guest of honor. And when she pointed out how everyone ignored him at breakfast, he realized. The blonde girl points right at a basic tent and tells him it's hers, and all he can manage to say is a super awkward, "Oh." Alicia hopped in with a huge smile, explaining that a creepy light was glowing from his tent, and while she promised it was totally normal back home, the blonde lady was fuming because he acted like it was no big deal. She leaned in close and got serious, telling him he'd better check with her before showing off his weird stuff to everyone else. The blonde lady promised to check with him from now on, but Alicia just cut to the chase and admitted she'd been dying to see that tool since last night. So while he sat there petting, his simple invite totally freaked Alicia out, and she backed away thinking there was no way she was going into a guy's tent at night. He was shocked by her reaction and realized he tried to apologize for being out of line, but the blonde woman cut him off to say he was being rude to women in general, leaving Alicia totally speechless. He suddenly remembered that Miss Alicia was actually 20 years old. It suddenly clicked that since he's 22, he's older than Alicia, but then the blonde girl reveals she's 19, which actually makes them both older. She gave him a major side-eye, totally sure he was just messing around, while Alicia held back a laugh and joked about how little guys are always in such a rush to grow up. He was getting super annoyed that they just saw him as a kid, so he scrambled to fix it, stuttering an apology and saying he meant young in a totally good way. Everything went totally silent until the blonde lady finally spoke up, saying they were even since they both messed up the ages, so it was time to just move on. Once they finished talking, Daichi looked away, suddenly remembering someone using earth magic to totally flatten the ground. He looked over at a group of guys tied up nearby, but the blonde woman caught him and told him to stop feeling sorry for them, which felt way too cold. Alicia keeps dropping the scary details about the mission, where 35 adventurers went after baby king apes, but it turned into a total disaster with only 5 people making it out alive. When Da, the blonde woman, pulls out a heavy metal collar and explains that every creature is forced to wear one, making Daichi flinch because the whole thing is just super creepy. He's totally hooked and asks if these baby apes are actually worth big money. So Alicia breaks down the prices. You get 20 gold coins for the tiny ones under 2 months, and one, he asks if they're basically criminals now. So the blonde woman explains they have to pay for all the destruction since they brought a whole pack of king apes back. But Alicia quickly jumps in to say it was just them being rowdy, not a serious crime. He asks what happens if he can't pay for the damage, and the answer is terrifying. He's basically going to be forced into total slavery. The world is just way too brutal, and as he leans back with a sigh, he realizes that being an adventurer is actually a total rip-off. Once she hears his take, the blonde lady quickly takes it back and says she messed up her words. She tells him she's actually an adventurer too, and says it's a great gig as he flashed an OK sign as it finally clicked. Using power-ups to approach a girl is considered super disrespectful in this new world. While he's thinking, Alicia gives him a head pat and tells the blonde lady to stop spoiling him, while Daichi grins and says he's doing an awesome job adjusting to this totally new world. He suddenly calls for a break, remembering a gift from his grandpa as he reaches into his bag. He pulled a massive pile of snacks, sandwiches, and drinks out of his bag with a huge grin, leaving his friends totally stunned. He told them to dig in, explaining it was a special dish from his home in Japan. He promised them it tastes amazing even if it looks a little weird. And right then, his tiny cat. Alicia was totally hyped and couldn't wait to try it, but the blonde woman just gave her a super serious and doubtful look. Daichi's super hyped to eat, and the blonde girl instantly knows the food came from that magic bag the guild leader gave him. It's the perfect cover for his secret item box to keep the food fresh, and Daichi confirms she's 100% right. He's just sitting there quietly in the moving carriage, zoning out for a second before finally looking over at his 2 friends. While they're on the move, a massive windmill pops up in the distance, marking their arrival at Takura village, and the blonde woman is totally shocked when he tells her they actually made it there early. He thinks back to his plastic sandwich wrap and water bottle, smirking because he knows these items are way too out of place for anyone in this world to see. The blonde girl next to him suddenly lets out a huge sigh of relief, and since he's totally confused, he asks her what she's talking about. He suggests they kill an hour by walking around the edge of town, and while Alicia is totally down, the blonde girl wants to eat on the carriage first, and then hit the village center while she scouts. She explains that checking out the village is way more fun than just looking at trees, and he agrees since he sticks out like a sore thumb anyway. After Alicia gives the thumbs up to the Karina asks how long she'll be. He guesses about 15 to 20 minutes, and while he and Alicia chill in the carriage, Karina heads off toward the village. He's chilling in the carriage, watching his cat Nike stretch out on the soft seat, while Alicia sits right next to him and a giant fox creature waits nearby. Alicia gets the cat's attention, and it meows back, so she holds up 2 fingers and Nike jumps up to bat at them. The tiny cat sticks the landing on the fox's fluffy back, and Alicia decides it's time to really pick up the pace. Her hand moves so fast, it's basically a blur, and the cat is struggling just to keep up with the game. Daichi is totally floored because he realizes it's not just Nike. Alicia is actually using some kind of insane physical boost herself. Alicia finally snags the cat and brags that Nike won't catch her this time, and as Daichi admits she won, she confirms that Nike finally figured out she can use physical enhancement. He looks Nike right in the eyes and asks to keep the cat's super strength a secret just between them. And while the cat totally agrees, Alicia is left scratching her head, wondering what they're even talking about. Alicia hears his request and pulls Nike into a hug, her face turning bright red as she whispers that she'll do it just because it's what Mr. Daichi wants. Her heart is racing as she shouts that she's back, but inside the carriage, things are super tense, while Daichi and Alicia just whisper each other's names under their breath. She finally speaks up about how fast she got back, but Alicia isn't alone, and she turns to the blonde woman next to her to welcome back Miss Karina. She looks dead serious, locking in with a look that says she's not playing around. Then she drops the news. They're actually stuck in this village for 2 whole days. This sudden delay makes Daichi realize something is totally wrong. He looks completely shocked and worried. Plans suddenly change, and the blonde woman tells a shocked Daichi that they're going to be stuck in Alicia Heartland for 2 whole days. He lets her words sink in, then turns to her and asks if something went down. It turns out those king apes did way more damage than they realized, so the crew is chilling in the village to recover while they wait for a place to stay, which means they've got nothing but free time right now. Once things finally calm down, she totally switches gears and catches Daichi off guard by asking if he wants to grab some lunch. She flashes a huge grin and yells out, totally hyped, that her own plan is the way to go. Daichi whips up some sandwiches and drinks, making the blonde woman freak out over the weird food, while Alicia wonders how you're even supposed to eat it, and since the blonde girl can't stop staring, Daichi asks if she's craving a sandwich too. She's totally caught off guard, and her eyes go wide. But he tells her it's basically just bread, and to just go for it. So she takes a bite, and her face instantly melts, because his mind is blown by the flavor as the bread, meat, and sweet sauce all hit at once, making every single bite a total masterpiece. Alicia kept stuffing her face and asked Daichi if there were actually veggies in there, since they tasted so amazing. Before he can even get a word out, the blonde girl is already beaming and thanking Daichi like crazy, so he just smiles and tells her to eat as much as she wants until Alicia spots another dish that smells super sweet and wonders if it's made of fruit. As the girls enjoyed their food, Daichi's cat Nike started meowing like crazy for a bite, so he promised the little guy he'd get some snacks too. Alicia watches the chaos and says that cat is a total handful, and Daichi totally agrees since Nike is also starving. Just then, the blonde woman's face totally changed and her eyes went wide as she stared down at her hand, a single drop of sweat rolling down her face. She's not scared at all. She's actually in total heaven, leaning back and losing her mind over how amazing that sandwich tastes. She takes a bite of the new treat and her eyes totally pop, asking what it is because it's so soft and sweet, while Daichi watches her like a hawk, dying to know what she thinks. Her shock turns into total joy, and with cream smeared on her face, she shouts that she finally gets why it's such a hit, while Daichi explains it's called whipped cream, and that girls are totally obsessed with it. He sees how much she's loving it, and offers her even more, and even though she asks if it's really okay, he just gives her a quick nod to let her know it's all good. She tells Karina she's a huge help and that there are way more whipped cream recipes to try, while he just thinks about how easy she is to win over. She stops worrying and gets a huge smile on her face, giving him a super happy, "Okay, Daiichi watches the girls chow down with a big smile, telling them he's just glad they're enjoying it, while secretly thinking he's actually pretty easy to win over too. He tries to flex, but she's not buying it at all, giving him a massive side-eye and thinking he's a total moron, while Daiichi watches from the door, smirking. The good vibes stuck around after their snack, but Daiichi suddenly looked super serious for a second before he went back to eating and scrolling through his tablets. Then, he pulls out another surprise, sliding a perfect slice of strawberry shortcake right in front of them. Karina and Alicia stared at the treat with their eyes wide open, and even Daiichi's cat Nike was leaning in to get a closer look. Back in a tent in the middle of nowhere, Klaus Bertram was losing it as he read the report out loud, unable to believe that someone actually drop-kicked King A. His girl Karina confirmed the news, admitting that even though it sounds totally insane, it's actually 100% real. Klaus pointed out that Daiichi had to fight off 5 king apes during the ambush and asked Karina if she got distracted from guarding Lord Asakura, but she shut him down, swearing she'd never lose focus on her client in the middle of a fight. He sat up on his bed and admitted she was totally right, remembering her wind magic lets her sense movement even when she can't see it, so he told her to just keep going. He rubbed his eyes in total disbelief after hearing about Asakura's fight, while Klaus explained that the guy had insane physical buffs and armor that could literally tank a king ape's bite. Karina locked in, her eyes sharp as she admitted she had no clue what he was actually capable of, totally agreeing with what Klaus was thinking. It was almost like things were way weirder than they looked. Klaus asked her what she thought as a pro. Karina was 100% sure about it. Daiichi was a total noob at swords and martial. If this was for real, Daiichi's power was a total freak of nature, since nobody on the whole continent could touch him in non-elemental magic. But Klaus noticed something else. Daiichi, Arena guessed he was some rich noble from another land, and Klaus actually agreed because only a spoiled kid would be this reckless. She asks what to do about Asakura, but Klaus makes it clear that Daiichi is way too powerful to lose, so he orders her to keep his past a total secret, reminding her Klaus told Karina she had to keep guarding Lord Asakura until they reached Caravan, reminding her that since Daiichi saved Alicia and the whole company, her new mission was to teach him enough to... He's grinning ear to ear as he brings out 2 slices of cake that look totally incredible on their own plates. Karina turns around as he says sorry for the heavy load, noticing she looks totally swamped with work. A little while later, they end up on a street full of old wooden buildings and stop right in front of a shop with a shirt on the sign. Inside, the shelves are packed with stacks of perfectly folded clothes. Daiichi steps out, rocking a fresh light tunic and a dark belt, hitting a pose and asking everyone what they think of his new fit. Karina and Alicia give him a super intense look, and after a second, Karina says he looks just like a traveler. He looks down at the basic outfit and asks if he looks lame. But Karina tells him that since she and Alicia are so used to his old style, they aren't the best judges. Besides, looking cool is the last thing they need to worry about right now. He's hunting for a new look that's low-key but still cool, and while he thinks about a crazy feathered outfit for a second, he quickly realizes that's way too extra. Karina shuts him down, saying that looking too cool will just blow his cover as a traveler. And even though he misses her being nice, he has to admit she's totally right. He takes her advice and grabs some basic clothes, but when he goes to pay, He calls the old shopkeeper a young lady, making her totally blush as she tells him to stop being such a flirt. The shopkeeper calls him out for being a smooth talker, but he keeps the charm going by guessing she's barely older than him, then totally shocks her by saying he actually has a daughter her age. His smooth talking works like a charm, and the shopkeeper is so impressed she gives him a discount, especially after he tells her she looks like her daughter's sister, while Karina just stands there looking. Once the deal is finished, he turns to Karina and asks if he can pay with something else besides just regular coins. Then he pulls out his payment, a massive bar of shiny, pure silver, and the shopkeeper, Karina, and Alicia are completely blown away. He fixed the mess fast by tossing over some coins, and while the panicked shopkeeper begged him to come back, the blonde woman suddenly yelled for him to wait up. She tried to stop them, but it was way too late because the crew was already out of the shop and back on the street. She whipped around and snatched his collar, accusing him of starting the mess on purpose. But Daichi just looked totally confused and tried to leave until she called him out for using cheap coins instead of his usual. She didn't believe his lies for a second, so she grabbed him even tighter and told him they were going straight to the guild leader, but he shut that idea down instantly. But he just flashed a big smile and pointed the other way, showing exactly where he was headed. His plan got totally shut down as the two girls grabbed him by the collar and dragged him off to give him a massive earful. Inside the tent, Klaus is giving Daichi a total death stare and asking what his deal is, but Daichi just holds up a bunch of clothes and says he's literally just trying to pay for them. Right outside, Alicia Heartland is just vibing on the ground with Daichi's tiny cat Nike, completely unaware of the massive deal going down inside. Things get super awkward at the shop when Daichi tries to pay, and Klaus just stares at the massive silver bar like, wait, are you actually serious right now? He notices the local silver coins have totally vanished since Daichi arrived, but Daichi just says that back home they use silver bars, and he hasn't even seen the local money yet. It hits him that since he could just grab food and water from his item box, he hasn't needed to spend a single cent until right now. Daichi realizes he's broke and asks Klaus to buy something off him, which Klaus totally understands, since a big deal like Lord Asakura wouldn't have any local cash on him anyway. Klaus Bertram just lets out a massive sigh and face palms, looking totally done with this whole mess. Klaus decided to just play along to keep things chill until they reached Koram, but he was low-key dying for Asakura to realize his logic was totally useless here and to stop showing off his rare items to literally everyone. While Klaus is stuck in his head, Daichi asks Alicia if she's still mad, but she just looks away and grits her teeth, insisting she was never angry in the first place. He kept apologizing for not asking first and begged her to stop being mad, but Alicia snapped that she wasn't even upset while roasting his attitude, making Daichi realize he totally blew it despite wanting to learn about the world. He wouldn't even promise to be more careful next time. After he made that promise, her tough act totally fell apart, and she got super flustered, saying it was okay since he didn't know any better, but he still needed to. She finally cooled down and started petting Nike, telling the little cat it wasn't his fault, but his master's, while Daichi wondered if the kitty was apologizing and whispered that he knew she. Alicia instantly shoved her blade against Daichi's neck, giving him a hilarious but scary look that totally froze him in place. She's being super serious, but then Daichi totally catches her off guard by offering a massive pile of candy as an apology, leaving Alicia and the little girl completely frozen in shock. She snaps out of it and asks if he really thinks some snacks can fix everything, but Daichi says, no way, explaining that back home, giving chocolates is how you apologize to a girlfriend or a close girlfriend when things get messy. He gives a little smirk and says that if chocolate could actually fix everything, the world wouldn't have any problems left. Alicia finally chills out and accepts his tradition, but the other girl is totally stuck on one thing, her eyes wide as she repeats the part about him having a lover or a girl he's close with. The second they taste the chocolate, the little girl's face lights up as she shouts about how good it is, and even Alicia is stunned, her eyes going wide as she wonders what she's even eating. Alicia sees how much she's loving the food and offers her another piece, which the girl happily takes with a big thank you. Daichi's cat is right there, vibing with the whole thing, and Alicia doesn't even look back as she accepts his apology, just telling him to be more careful next time. He walks through the village and sees a bunch of loud, tough-looking guys making a total scene everywhere. He tells his crew it's crazy how many adventurers are in such a tiny village, and while the big bearded guy agrees, Karina adds that they're all super rude too. He's starting to get a bad vibe, and admits he's felt people watching him for a while, which Alicia confirms by explaining that since he's unarmed and everyone knows he's a guest of the Bertram company who beat those king apes, he looks like a rich and easy target for any thug nearby. He's totally freaked out and wants to get answers at the weapon shop, but Karina shuts him down fast, telling him they need to stay low and avoid making a scene in the village. He begs them not to risk their lives for him, swearing that even though he looks dangerous, he's actually a peaceful guy they can totally trust. Karina just lets out a massive sigh, hoping that beating the king ape didn't give him a huge ego, but Daichi just shrugs it off and asks who's actually stronger. Alicia thinks a king ape would totally win a 1 versus 1, but Karina points out that humans are way scarier because they use traps and teamwork to win. She totally agrees and says they need to gear Daichi up right now so he doesn't stand out to the local adventurers. So he decides to start by fixing his look. He gets super hyped as they walk up to an armor shop with a helmet and sword sign hanging over the brick entrance. He pulls out some chest armor to see if it'll work, but Karina thinks it's way too light. And while Nike snacks on Alicia's shoulder, thinking Daichi has his priorities totally messed, he gears up and lifts a massive, scary-looking shield. And while Alicia thinks it looks sick, Karina points out that it doesn't match his armor at all. He knows carrying that shield is basically screaming to everyone that he's got super strength, so he stuffs it in his inventory and moves on to picking a weapon. Inside, the walls are packed with racks holding every kind of weapon you can imagine. While he's checking out the gear, Karina asks if he can even handle a longsword, and Daichi cockily says he just needs to look scary and swing it around. But Karina immediately shuts him down and tells him that's definitely not how it works. He was really struggling with his lack of skill, so Karina told him he only had his insane physical power and magic gear to rely on. But Alicia stayed positive and knew he'd figure it out. What she said really hit home, and he started thinking that maybe magic gear was actually way better than just being good with a sword until it finally clicked. The magic users were the ones who think about it. Mages can plow a field way faster than any normal person, even if they're super strong, and they can start a fire in a second just like Karina did yesterday. The scary truth was that the gap between magic users and regular people was only going to get wider, and things were about to spiral totally out of control. A light bulb suddenly went off in his head as he realized he could actually make things better for everyone. He thought about selling fancy glassware to all the rich nobles, while Alicia wanted to sell. While they're walking through a busy market, Karina notices he's acting super quiet and asks what's up, but he just brushes it off and says he was thinking about his home. But then something else caught his eye. While they were out shopping, they picked up some crazy news. Apparently, a bunch of goblins were seen lurking around Takura village. The village asked While the crew talked about the goblin threat, Karina revealed that 40 adventurers had gathered to fight, but she was super annoyed because 7 of those teams just showed up without even signing up first. She was worried that even with a huge crowd, they still wouldn't be enough to win. The bearded guy stepped in to explain why things were so dangerous. He said that while lone gobbles, after sizing up the danger, Karina called it like she saw it. Those adventurers were basically E-rank weaklings at their absolute best. Since she brought up her rank, we finally get the full breakdown of the system, where every adventurer starts at the very bottom as an H-rank apprentice. A-rank is a massive deal where nobles treat you like a knight, but S-rank is even crazier because the king himself gives you a special title for doing legendary stuff. Karina explains that SNAA is just for the top-tier elites, with 7 basic ranks from G to A below them. But she warns that being a total beast in a fight doesn't always mean you'll have a high rank. She realized your rank is basically just a scoreboard for your wins, but she had to admit that anyone at D rank or higher has definitely survived some crazy hard fights. She told him she was an experienced C-rank adventurer, so Daiichi knew he could count on her. And even though he felt super strong, he still hadn't even gotten to test out that special weapon he ordered. He turned his focus back to the adventurers and the mess they were in. He told them it was hard to say what would happen, because the goblin army was huge, and there were just too many people everywhere. Alicia wasn't buying his vague answer, so she leaned in and demanded the full story, convinced Daiichi wouldn't be so reckless if he actually knew the truth. And even his cat Nike meowed from his shoulder like he totally agreed. She suddenly leaned in super close, her face right in his, as she hyped up how even Nike agreed with her, leaving Daiichi totally freaking out. He's tripping over his words while trying to explain this one memory that just popped into his head. He shared a dark story from 2 months ago about a village just 4 days away that got totally wiped out by bandits, proving that things are definitely not peaceful anymore. Karina breaks down the whole story for them. This village was always getting raided by goblins, so they finally asked the guild for help. But by the time anyone got there, the village was already... He kept listening as they explained that failing a lord's quest is a total disaster because you have to pay a huge fine and your reputation gets trashed, with a diagram showing the lord and the villagers judging you for being a failure. Karina spoke up and said she would have searched a way bigger area and wiped out way more goblins, basically calling the last group total slackers. He started putting the pieces together and realized something crazy. What if the adventurers and bandits are actually working together? If that's true, the next village is definitely going to be crawling with more. He suddenly switched gears and showed her a car with a gun on it, asking her to come along so he could test something out. And even though Karina was pretty confused, she didn't. He explained he wanted to test a weapon from back home to see if she thought it was actually strong, reminding her that since they'd already crushed 5 king apes, a buffed-up goblin general, her face went totally serious as she dropped the bad news. Those goblin generals are way more powerful than they thought. He just gave a helpless shrug since she wasn't budging, knowing this news just made his whole plan way more complicated. He turns to Alicia and asks if she can use physical enhancement too, suggesting they head to the open grasslands where it's easy to escape if things go wrong. And with a tiny cat on her head, she tells him she can use the skill just a little bit. He's totally hyped to go, but Karina stops him with a catch. They have to stay right at the edge of the woods, where they can still see the guards and the convoy. As they're walking through town, he's moving along until he suddenly slams right into someone else. He bumps into a scary-looking thug who spins around and starts screaming in his face to watch where he's going. Daichi is shocked by how aggressive people are here compared to back home in Japan, but after fighting giant apes with Karina, he isn't even a little bit scared. His squad backs him up as he loses it, yelling at Daichi for trying to mess with him. Everyone in town was totally staring at the three of them as they walked through the noisy, buzzing streets. One of the thugs starts trash-talking Daichi, asking if he's too scared to speak, while eyeing the two pretty girls by his side, and he demands Daichi hand over all his cash. The thugs just laugh in her face as she stands her ground, with the spiky-haired guy talking trash, while the older bearded creep suggests they take things somewhere private. Daichi watches the whole thing. Before he can even move, Karina steps in with a stone-cold warning. She tells the thug that if he actually kills the Lord, he's going to owe a massive fine. Daichi. He snaps out of his shock and locks in, realizing these adventurers are ready for a fight, so he decides he won't kill them. He's just going to wreck them so badly that it scares off anyone else who thinks about messing with him. Right as he's deciding, the spiky-haired thug totally snaps, screaming that he warned them as he pulls his sword and charges straight at the group. Daichi doesn't even flinch as the guy rushes him, instead just turning to Karina to make sure it's okay to beat them to a pulp as long as they don't die. Daichi, Alicia, and Karina are cornered by a pack of thugs who say since they didn't listen to the warnings, they're getting a massive beatdown, but at least they aren't planning to kill them. The thugs warn him he's messing with the wrong crew, but Daichi doesn't even flinch, telling Alicia to get back, while he lets Karina know he's taking these two guys down himself. As he gears up for the fight, a genius idea hits him. He can actually stack his modern world shopping, his infinite storage, and his gear-buffing magic all at once to create the ultimate combo. With a cocky grin, he kicks off his plan. And before those thugs can even touch their weapons, they're getting blasted by invisible hits and crashing to the ground in total shock. The spiky-haired guy lets out a wild scream, his face twisting in pure pain from that brutal hit to his leg. Wilder's crew is just standing there completely stunned, while Daichi looks totally unbothered, his hand still frozen in a flick after launching that tiny smoking shot that caused all this madness. Karina jumps right into the chaos, moving like a total blur as she knocks out two thugs with the handle of her weapon before they can even react. She stood over the beaten guys as Daichi walked up and asked if she really sliced the tendons in their main arms, and she just looked him in the eye and said she totally did. She leans right into the terrified guy's face and warns him to stay far away from her clients, making him shake as he begs for mercy and promises to tell his whole crew to back off. The crowd nearby was totally stunned, whispering in disbelief that the kid and his crew actually took down the ruffians. Once things finally calmed down, Alicia scooped up Nike as he woke up, joking about how peaceful he looked, while Daichi just couldn't believe the cat slept through all that craziness. She went from worrying about the cat to being straight up furious. She spun around, pointed at the losers, and demanded they apologize to Nike right now. Everyone was totally shocked because nobody saw that coming. Scared for their lives, the thugs did exactly what they were told, begging the giant cat for mercy and swearing they'd never do it again, while Karina watched in total shock until, while Alicia snuggled the purring cat and told everyone to be thankful for Nike's kindness, he watched them and realized that the cat's charm was actually a pretty terrifying power. He turns to Karina and calls her out, asking why she had to blow their feet off after already slicing their tendons. Talk about overkill. As they walk away, she explains that basic water magic can fix a cut tendon, but reattaching a whole foot is way harder and needs some serious high-level skills. Alicia mentions that healing like this costs a crazy amount of money in the capital, and it finally clicks for Daichi that healing is just water magic, making him realize his cat Nike could probably fix people He realizes this was all part of his master plan, because those thugs are going to be out of commission for a long time. And now that he's shown off his power, nobody will dare. Daiichi's big plans get totally wrecked when Karina asks if any inn will even let them stay looking like this, and the thought of sleeping outside freaks him out so much that he suddenly drops into. Karina totally brushes off his apology and gets right in his face, demanding to know exactly how he blasted that thug's foot off. She calls him out for using an attack skill. Karina and Alicia are totally stunned by his confession, so he asks if special skills are rare in this land. And after Alicia confirms they're super hard to find, Daiichi realizes it. The blonde woman explains that his power is actually legendary, since only one person on the whole continent gets a unique skill, making him realize he totally undersold how big of a deal it really was. He just scratches his head, feeling super awkward while both girls stare him down, waiting for his next move. He gives in with a little smirk and admits they caught him, confessing that this crazy power is the exact reason he was kicked out of his home. He explains the dark truth. Because he was the only one with that power, his own family actually started hunting him down. He asks them to stop talking about it, leaving the whole group totally stunned. He sees they're worried and tells them it's fine. But since they're dying to know more, he agrees to spill what he can as long as they keep it a total secret between the three of them. To show off, he opens his hand and a dark little object pops out of thin air, explaining that his special power lets him create lead inside iron and blast it at insane speeds using fire. The blonde girl is totally shocked that he took down their last enemy with just a tiny piece of metal, so he explains that the bullet uses a massive explosion to hit that hard. Then he pulls out an even bigger one and says the damage gets way worse as they get larger, leaving Alicia absolutely terrified of what that thing could actually do. He reminded everyone about his experiment and asked them point blank, now that they've seen his crazy skill, how useful do they think it would actually be in a real fight? Karina asked if they really needed more tests, but he wouldn't budge, saying it was still just an experiment and he had way more stuff he wanted to try out. Once his experiments were finally done, he called for a snack break and pulled out both sweet and salty treats to see which one Karina wanted. Her face turned totally red as she shyly asked if she could have some of those sweet snacks. He agreed instantly, realizing that sweets were definitely Karina's weakness, and told the group they could chat about his skills once they hit their break. He decided they needed a wide-open spot for the next part, since going deeper into the monster-filled forest was way too risky. So he asked Alicia to hold Nike, and she and Delilah were totally down to help. While Alicia was busy snuggling the little cat, he felt awesome seeing her vibe with Nike, knowing they were finally becoming the best of friends. Nike starts messing with her hair, and she's totally over it, telling the cat to knock it off. Daiichi is hyped to get started and grabs the same weapon he used to crush those bandits, while Karina just stands there looking bored and telling him to quit stalling. He's talking about the Desert Eagle, the same beast that blew a guy's foot off and fires the most powerful bullets he's got. He explains the trick. By opening a pocket dimension in his palm, he can fire his Desert Eagle with just his mind, all while looking at Nike and telling her how amazing she looks. He fires with just a thought, letting out a massive blast that shreds a tree into splinters, while Alicia and Karina watch in total shock. Daiichi turns back to the shocked girls and casually asks what they think, leaving Alicia stuttering that it's incredible, while Karina admits you almost never see magic this crazy. She totally gets it wrong and asks if he just launched a hunk of lead. And while Daiichi says she's right, Karina is already moving on, asking if it's hard to. She straight up admits the bullet was moving way too fast for her to even track. Daiichi points out that while earth magic has some heavy hitters, they aren't nearly as fast as this. Then he asks himself, who wins in a fight between a normal guy with attack magic and a pro-adventurer who can't use magic at all? And he immediately decides the magic user takes the win, obviously. Serena just nodded since it was super obvious. But then she asked if mage ranks worked differently than adventurer ones. So Alicia explained that you aren't even a real mage until you register. Karina didn't care about official ranks, saying anyone who can use attack magic is a danger no matter what. So Alicia broke the tension by suggesting they talk about the ranking systems over some snacks. Before they can even react, Daiichi pulls out a massive sniper rifle and fires a shot so loud it kicks up a huge cloud of dust, leaving both women totally stunned. That shot blasted a perfect hole straight through a giant tree, and since only the world's best mages can do that, Daiichi started wondering if his cat Nike was actually stronger than... Karina stood there totally frozen, with her hand over her mouth, realizing that while blowing up a tree with magic is one thing, shooting a clean hole straight through it is a whole different level of impossible. While Karina is still reeling from that insane power, Alicia, who's still clutching Nike, starts running the numbers, saying she only knows 3 earth mages and 1 spirit user who could pull off. Saiichi jumps in to explain that while Nike's water bullet might look weak compared to the insane magic in Ice Guy's stories, in this world, it's actually a top-tier attack that only the strongest mages can use. Karina lets out a massive sigh of relief, admitting she totally thought he was about to blast a hole through that giant tree, which leaves Daiichi looking completely caught off guard. He brushes her off, saying Nike's spirit magic is his real secret weapon. Then he summons a massive Gatling gun and a giant needle just to show off what he can really do. With the demos finally wrapped up, Daiichi decides it's time for a snack break, and the whole crew is totally hyped to eat. He reaches into his infinite storage and pulls out 2 perfect slices of cake, complete with plates and forks. A few minutes later, the group is chilling at a table in the clearing, and while they eat dessert, Daiichi tries to bring up mage rankings again, but Karina totally shuts him down so she can finish her food. She and Alicia notice Daiichi acting totally different, so they ask what's up, and he just grips his mug with a serious look and tells them he's got something major to ask both of them. Alicia leans in with a blush and starts to say she wants to try something herself, but he cuts her off with a serious look, announcing he's going to use his powers to open a shop right here in the village. Daiichi Asakura gets a crazy idea and decides to kick off a brand new experiment by opening a shop right here in the village. Once things wrap up, he chills in a sunny clearing with Alicia Heartland and the blonde girl Karina to figure out their next move. As he talks, Alicia's eyes pop wide open with shock and curiosity as she starts to give her answer. She's totally hyped and dying to see what cool gear he's got, but Karina is super sketched out, bracing herself for whatever crazy stuff he's about to pull out next. Seeing how hyped they are, Daiichi asks if they want to check out the loot first, since he wants Alicia's expert opinion on the magic gear before he talks to the guild leader, Klaus. He shows off his goods, pulling out a box of red-tipped matches and some little white cubes wrapped in paper, then asks if they've ever seen tools like this before. Alicia and Karina stare at the box of matches totally confused, and Alicia admits she's never seen anything like them and has no clue what they're even for. Seeing how confused they are, Daiichi strikes a match and a flame instantly pops up. He explains they're just waterproof fire starters, and while Karina thinks it's magic, Alicia checks the... He tells her she's spot on, explaining that the match isn't magic or some special tool, then holds up the flame to show that even people without powers can use it. The flame stays steady as he explains that fire starters are just tools to make things easy. And since they burn so well, even one waterproof match is enough to get a real fire going before he drops it onto some dry leaves. That he agrees she's right about the zero magic, and Alicia thinks for a second, realizing these matches could totally replace a fire-starting magic tool. Now that he knows he's right, he turns to them and drops his big plan to sell these items to everyone who can't use magic. Karina calls it out right away, saying non-magic gear is a total flop, but Alicia gets it. She knows Daichi just wants to make life easier for regular people. Chi and Karina listened as Daichi held a box of matches and explained his plan to sell them so cheap that even the poorest person could afford them. He turned to Karina and asked if she was shocked, admitting that a rich guy like him wanting to work with someone poor might look totally fake. But she just shrugged and said she didn't see it that way at all. She told him she was just trying to figure out how to run the business by keeping the rich people separate from the poor ones, and she promised she didn't doubt him for a second. She worried that since it was so cheap, it would sell out instantly, and if he couldn't keep up, his reputation would be trashed. But Alicia jumped in to remind them that he said making them was actually super easy, which totally shocked Alicia, and she asked if he could really just whip them up whenever they needed more. He went quiet for a second, thinking hard with his hands locked together, before saying, the next big move happens right after he talks to the guild leader, Klaus. He locked in and told him straight up that he'd risk it all just to convince him. The group is already crushing their second cake of the day, and as Karina digs into her cheesecake, she promises to finally stop meddling while Alicia sits there looking totally satisfied. While they're chilling, he brings up magic and remembers Karina can use water, fire, and wind on top of her basic spells, so he turns to Alicia to see what she can do. She gives a knowing smirk and reveals her insane secret. She can actually control every single element. He's totally blown away and shouts that her power is insane, while Alicia shyly just nods and says he's right. Marina jumps in to hype up Alicia's smart move, but she warns Daichi to stop snooping and keep everything a secret. And after Alicia says sorry for the mystery, Daichi totally agrees to stay quiet. He switches gears to ask if they're high-ranking mages, and when Karina reveals she and Alicia are B rank, Daichi gets totally flustered, muttering that she calls him out for not looking like a mage, since he just used a sword against the king apes, then explains she's a B rank because she's actually cracked. Still shocked by their new Berenki rank, Daichi asked Karina if she could use even more insane magic gear than what she used to crush those terrifying king apes. She explained that she did everything she possibly could in that mess, especially since buffing her gear and boosting her body takes way too much time. Plus, she was busy using wind magic to... Their serious talk got totally cut off when a cup of weird whipped cream appeared, and even though it looked sketchy, they told him to try it, leaving a super embarrassed Daichi just saying sorry. Alicia takes a bite, and her face totally lights up with joy. Karina looks at him, super confused about why he's apologizing out of nowhere. Daichi just ignores her and asks Alicia if she dodged the question and admitted she totally froze up against the king apes because she's never really fought before, and Karina thought it was super rare for someone to be that honest. Daichi gets the vibe and switches things up, asking if she's trying to become a magic tool smith, since he remembers she's got a natural talent for enchantment magic, and Alicia totally agrees, saying she's super lucky to have those powers. She explains that this skill lets you craft magic tools by pumping elemental power into items that match it perfectly, like using fire magic on a fire-friendly material to make a fire starter. She explains that if you craft a tool with these special materials, Anyone with a bit of mana can use it, even if they don't have fire magic. He's totally hyped and asks if he can put all 4 elements on one tool. But Karina tells him to chill because it's way harder than it looks, and Alicia agrees there are definitely limits. They start talking about magic blowtorches, explaining that while basic ones just make a regular flame, a pro like Smith can make high-end versions with adjustable heat that cost a total fortune. He figures there's gotta be a safety switch so you don't blast a fireball while just trying to cook dinner, and Alicia admits those extra features definitely make the price tag jump. She wonders if you're just born with that kind of talent. And as Alicia starts to get nervous, Karina jumps in to explain that it's not just enchantment. You're actually born with every bit of magic you have. After hearing the truth, he stops to think and realizes he's got to give up on making magic gear himself, especially since wind magic scouting is way better than any modern tech. He's super jealous and wishes he had that power, even if he has no clue how to pull it off. He looks over at Nike chilling on the table and realizes his cat is becoming a total beast, since she's the perfect scout and her water magic is a crazy secret weapon. He told Karina that her and Nike's scouting skills would be a total game changer and asked for a demo, but she was hesitant since you can't even see wind magic. He kept pushing, saying he still wanted to watch her use it even if he couldn't see a thing, so Karina just sighed and told him she didn't mind. Then she lets her magic explode, sending a massive ring of energy blasting out that's so strong it even makes a bowl of soup nearby ripple. The second that invisible wave washed over them, Nike jumped into action and licked Daichi's ear as a secret signal. The cat's warning put him on high alert just as Karina yelled for everyone to stop because something was close. And while Daichi first thought it was a monster, the way it moved looked way more like a person, making him wonder why anyone would be this deep in the woods. Alicia jumped in before anyone could say a word, thanking Karina, but then calmly pointing out there were 8 people nearby, totally shocked that her own wind magic was actually more precise, and realizing Karina, her words hit Daichi like a ton of bricks, and he realized it wasn't just Karina. Klaus and Jeffrey were hiding stuff about Alicia too, but he forced himself to focus, because now wasn't the time to overthink it. He grabbed his sword as 8 people closed in, wondering if they were actually adventurers, since there weren't enough of them to be bandits, and Alicia totally agreed. Karina, the blonde girl, decided to play it safe, tightening her glove as she sent her invisible magic through the woods to track their every move. While she kept an eye on the group, he realized that even though he was super strong for this world, he still wasn't used to actual fighting, so he knew he had to use this chance to toughen up and find his guts. He tells Karina they can totally handle these guys and keep Alicia safe even if they're bandits. He warns her not to do anything stupid though, because things could still get dangerous. He looked over at his cat Nike, who was growling like crazy, and seeing his pet so freaked out made him realize those guys really were dangerous bandits. He peeked through the bushes, and his jaw dropped when he saw a pile of modern guns, like assault rifles, miniguns, and snipers. So he decided right then that if these, realizing just how bad the situation was, the 3 of them scrambled behind a massive tree to keep an eye on the enemy and their heavy weapons. You demand to know how many there are, and from her lookout, Karina confirms their numbers have totally grown, while Alicia hides nearby, sensing things are getting serious and asking what happened. She just dropped a single word, 20, and while she let that number sink in, his face stayed totally blank. He crunched the numbers and realized there were way too many, so if they're bandits, their base has to be close, and finding it is his next big move. While he was busy planning, Alicia tried to help out, but Karina totally shut her down and said she's got it handled. She was feeling super confident because she'd just found a massive camp of tents, exposing the bandits' secret hideout right in front of them. Once they find the spot, they head back to tell a guy with a ponytail and a mustache, and after he thanks them, Alicia says they need to alert Captain Jeffrey right away. Meanwhile, the news was already spreading through the official lines, and a guy with a sharp mustache told his assistant to get that info to Jeffrey right away. He's just chilling and sipping his tea, but when the official tries to pour him another cup, Daichi asks if they can talk about something else while they wait for Captain Jeffries to show. Daichi announces he's opening a shop in the village, making the official scream at the top of his lungs. Daichi flinches at the noise and pulls out his first products. A box. He strikes a match to show off a tiny flame, telling the stunned official that this thing doesn't need a single drop of magic to work. He explains that these matches are strictly one-time use, and the flame burns out super fast before you have to toss them. The official asks about the price, and Daichi explains he's selling everything super cheap to help out anyone who can't use magic. He prices the matches at 2 silver coins, knowing they only cost him a few hundred yen, because he's here to make a profit, not give handouts. The official finally catches on and asks about the price, so Daichi tells him it's just 1 silver coin for a box of 60, leaving the guy totally shocked that they're even cheaper than waterproof matches. He looks over at his partner Karina to see what she thinks, but Daichi doesn't even let her speak before explaining that these fire starters are just cheap, flammable bonuses he's throwing in for free with the matches. The official hands Daichi a strange stone on a cord and tells him to light the fire with it, leaving his old paper starter sitting totally useless on a plate. He checks out the new tool and suddenly realizes it starts fires without any matches, so he decides to just focus on selling his own fire starters instead. While thinking about the plan, the mustache official tells Alicia that Daichi should charge way more for his fire starters, but she shuts that idea down instantly. Daichi's got her back, and with a super serious look, he swears the price is staying at exactly 1 silver coin. Everything goes dead silent as the official stares at Daichi, realizing he's not backing down one bit. He's thinking over his plan, and even though he feels a little bad for playing hardball, he's sticking to it because he knows Klaus thinks he's a total VIP, and he can't let them find out how insanely powerful he actually is. The mustache guy rubbed his chin and finally gave in, deciding that if Daichi was sticking to that price, he wasn't going to ask any more questions. With the deal officially locked in, Daichi started showing off a bunch of secret, high-end gear he was planning to sell to the super-rich nobles. The official's eyes lit up as he shouted that he'd take every single one. But right then, a guy named Jeffrey called out from outside the tent. Daichi suggested they finish their business. Right after the announcement, the tent flap swings open and Captain Jeffrey pokes his head in, looking totally serious as he asks to come inside. He didn't even wait for an answer before barging in, carrying a totally knocked-out Karina in his arms. The whole room went dead silent the moment he walked in, and the official with the mustache immediately started barking questions, demanding Jeffrey explain everything about the forest, those mysterious people hiding there, and what was really going down in the village. Word is spreading fast in the next town over that bandits completely trashed Torino village, and now those same thugs are taking over their own streets while creepy figures hide out in the woods. Word gets back to the authorities, and the official with the mustache tells Daichi, Alicia, and Karina they've brought him some crazy info again, so he asks Daichi for his take, and Daichi gets serious, saying they absolutely have to go check out those creepy figures in the woods. He taps his fingers, thinking they could just be hunters, but after the Torino raid and all those robberies, he's betting they're actually bandits, and Daichi 100% agrees. He asks if Daichi is for real about fighting bandits with such a tiny crew. So Daichi admits it's a huge risk and suggests they split up to scout the forest. The mustache guy thinks it over and agrees they need to check the forest, but he refuses to break up his team. He agrees they need to be careful, but he's got a better plan. He says Karina should be on the search team. Before anyone can say no, he volunteers himself too. The official looks Karina right in the eye, calls her the guild leader, and tells her that since she and Daichi are his guests, he won't let them get into any danger, basically shutting down their whole plan while Karina just stands there looking totally chill. She pushes back against the official and says the plan is actually a great idea, reminding everyone how Lord Asakura totally dominated the king apes with his crazy, non-elemental magic that's basically as strong as a high-ranking mage, and Alicia is definitely skilled enough to keep herself out of trouble. Alicia jumps in, saying Lord Asakura has the strongest fire magic of any merchant there and can even buff his body to bolt if things get dangerous. The official isn't buying it, and when Alicia offers to cause a distraction, he just shuts her down, saying the fighting is for the guards only. She even tells him she can blast them with long-range magic, but he just brushes her off and says they've got it covered. He turns and asks Daichi straight up how well he can fight, but Daichi is starting to realize that based on how everyone treats Alicia, she might actually be a noble. The official gets the point and tells them to avoid every fight so they can make it back home safe with all their energy saved up. With the deal finally set, Jeffrey stays on guard for any threats. Karina starts putting the search team together, and Daichi steps up to handle all the recruiting. Now that the plan is locked in, the squad heads out to a wide-open field and starts setting up their base. With the plan finally set, Karina stepped up and said she'd lead the search party herself. She also grabbed 2 bodyguards to keep an eye on Daichi and Alicia. But she was still Super Z. He didn't care about hiding his powers and let her handle the guards, but after thanking him, Karina gave him a massive warning to never show his full strength to anyone. He totally agreed to her deal and promised to watch out, but Karina just smirked and told him he was way too trusting. She told him he had to hide his crazy skill, so Daichi agreed and started looking for new gear. Since big guns were off the table, he decided to order a katana, leaving Alicia to. Once his gear was ready, he went looking for a crew and spotted a guy and a girl chilling nearby. So he walked straight up and told Dennis and Frida he had a job for them. They both whipped around to face him, cutting their talk short as Frida asked what was up, and Dennis demanded to know why he was so hurt. They looked super curious, but also a little suspicious, as they waited for him to explain what was going on. A guy in full armor walks up to the new squad and says he spotted about 20 sketchy people in the woods, so he needs their help to go check it out. Dennis thinks the payout is total trash and says it's not even worth the effort. But Frida tells him to relax, since she's just here to make bank and have a blast, while Daichi just sits there silently soaking everything in. As they get ready to head out, the armored guy asks Karina about Daichi and Alicia, and she starts explaining their story while they hit the road. As they walk, Daichi watches his new crew and realizes that even though they're joking around, these guys are actually total pros. Marina takes charge and starts giving everyone their jobs, putting herself and Mr. Asakura right on the front lines. She keeps setting up the squad, putting Miss Alicia in the middle and sending Frida and Dennis to watch the back. Dennis throws an arm around Daichi and starts grilling him, saying he heard the merchant is actually a decent fighter and asking which corps he's in. But a totally embarrassed Daichi admits that the crazy King Ape battle was only his second fight ever. Instead of being mad, Dennis just laughs and claps him on the shoulder, saying that taking down King Apes in his second fight proves he's got insane talent, even calling him Mr. Asakura. Daichi thinks being formal is super weird and tells Dennis to just use his name. But Dennis just smirks and suggests calling him Lord Daichi instead. Now that they're finally getting along, the two head through the forest with Dennis casually throwing his arms over Daichi's shoulders. While they're on the move, Dennis asks Daichi if it's true he's heading to the city of Karam to open up his own shop. Daichi confirms he's heading to Karam, and Dennis thinks it's a smart move since it's a massive trade hub between the capital and the port. But Dennis is left. They keep chatting as they roll into town, and while Dennis thought they'd be selling epic foreign treasures, Daichi explains he's starting small with just a simple little stall. A girl nearby hears him and gets super curious, leaning in to ask exactly what kind of stuff he's trying to sell. While they're trekking through the woods, Daichi shows Dennis his fire gear and explains they aren't the legendary lighters everyone's talking about, but actually waterproof matches, striking one to show off a steady little flame. Dennis leans in close, sweating and totally blown away by the flame, asking if it's actually magic, while Daichi just finds the whole thing hilarious. Meanwhile, the leader Karina looks back with a super serious face, telling the squad they're almost at the spot where she sensed those 8 people and ordering everyone to get into formation. She scans the thick forest, wondering if something is lurking nearby, and the girl with pigtails agrees, warning the group they need to be extra careful from here on out. The squad stops for a sec, but Dennis just chills on the ground and brags that he's always ready for a fight, while Karina just calls him a total worrywart. Out of nowhere, a blur of white fur leaps from the bushes, giving Daichi a total heart attack before he realizes it's just his cat, Nike, popping out from the right. He's totally shocked, but Karina explains that Nike's wind magic sensed something, so they need to stay on high alert as the twin-tailed girl reveals there are 3 people about 5 kilometers away. The crew keeps pushing through the thick forest, with Karina leading the way, looking totally locked in, while Daichi drags behind, letting out a huge sigh. The group stops as Daichi pulls out a weird gadget called binoculars, and after explaining to a shocked Dennis how they make faraway stuff look super close, he takes a peek and confirms their target is right nearby. He puts the binoculars down and tells Karina he saw a glow far away, admitting his cat Nike actually spotted it first. Then Dennis grabs the lenses and starts freaking out because everything looks so massive. The girl with the twin tails locks in and senses a group moving less than 2 kilometers away, but she admits it's just too far to see any real details. Dennis is totally blown away by Alicia's scouting skills, and now that the enemy is right on top of them, Karina gets fired up and tells everyone to gear up for battle, making sure he whips out this massive high-tech shield that looks totally futuristic, making Karina and the twin-tail girl freeze in their tracks just to stare at it. She looks at the shield like it's way too bulky and asks if he could have picked something even harder to carry, but the girl with twin tails is totally obsessed, saying it looks super deep. She pointed out a cave about 2 kilometers away to Daichi, while the rest of the squad stood right behind them in the clearing, totally ready for action. She started sketching in the dirt with a stick, explaining that a whole group of demi-humans was hiding out inside that cave. She locked in and focused her senses to get a better count. She realized there were way more people than she first thought. It wasn't just 50 enemies, it was actually closer to. Daichi's face went totally serious because he knew a group that big meant nothing but trouble in that cave, and his friends looked just as worried. Rita warned them not to jump to conclusions, but she agreed that a crowd this big was definitely a bad sign, so Karina decided it was smarter to back off for now until they knew more. Daichi just smirked and looked away, teasing them for being way too careful with their plan. He was keeping his cool until Dennis totally lost it, slapping his forehead and realizing those half-humans probably already caught their scent with their crazy sense of smell. He gets serious and breaks down their choices, saying the best they can do is grab as much intel as possible for the base. He warns them that the absolute worst-case scenario is they. Daiichi nods like he gets the plan, but he's sweating bullets and clenching his fist as the nerves finally start to show on his face. While he's trying to make sense of it all, Jeffrey puts a hand on his shoulder to steady him. The big guy then asks if he knows what kind of client a guard likes best. Jeffrey smirks and says he wants them to be obedient, making Daiichi crack up at the thought of a reward while the blonde girl nearby watches his crazy energy in total shock. Saichi reveals he's from a foreign land where his own family was actually hunting him. And since they use silver bars for cash back home, he grins and says he'll definitely take Jeff. Seeing Daiichi finally flip his script, the blonde woman calls for a retreat, while Frida just smirks and says she loves an obedient boy who knows how to turn on the charm. The squad heads deep into the woods, with Daiichi leading the way, and as Jeffrey watches from behind, Daiichi pulls out a little gadget that suddenly triggers a blinding flash of light. He peeks over the top of the hill, and his eyes go wide, totally confused by what he sees. The entire bandit camp, with all their tents and wagons, just straight up vanished, leaving the whole valley totally empty and creepy. The blonde girl next to him just drops the news that the bandits are raiding the village, and a shocked Daiichi can't believe they're actually inside already. Looking down from their spot, the group watches as the bandits' wagons roll right into the village, confirming the enemy has officially moved in. Daiichi is totally stressed because the villagers are freaking out, and he's scared that a spy hiding in the crowd will leak their plan and force the bandits to strike first. The blonde woman breaks down the plan, explaining they don't even need to take out the bandits directly. And Jeffrey adds that if they just look like an unstoppable force standing guard, they've already won the fight. She says a messenger is already racing to the Knights Guild, so they just need to hold down the village and keep the enemy busy until backup arrives. The squad looked at the mess they were in and realized it was a total disaster. She wanted to go back and report everything, but Frida didn't think the villagers would even believe them. Then, she realized there wasn't much they could do for now, so she told the crew they'd be sleeping outside while everyone huddled at camp for a super intense night. They decided to camp in the field right by the entrance so they wouldn't be spread too thin, which made it way easier to defend the spot and let the villagers jump in to help if they wanted to. Once the camp was set up, they needed the locals on their side, so the blonde girl asked Jeffrey what the village chief actually said during their meeting. He found out the village already had a massive squad ready to fight, and they were totally down to help. Frito finally stopped stressing and looked way more relaxed. Jeffrey even said that if the locals, with the alliance finally locked in, she started calling the shots, telling Dennis and Frida to get some sleep before heading back to their posts, while she personally led Daiichi and Alicia to the main road. Daiichi looked at her totally surprised, pointing out that she'd suddenly ditched the formal Mr. Asakura for the much more personal Mr. Daiichi. As that question hung over the room, Frida and Jeffrey just traded these super shady smirks like they knew exactly what was up. They were all teasing the blonde woman, and she got super flustered, waving her hands and telling them they had it all wrong because Mr. Asakura, the more she tried to explain, the more suspicious her friends got. Frida pointed out how weirdly formal she was being during the search, like she was totally nervous or hiding a massive secret. Finally, while the roasting continued, Jeffrey turned back to Daiichi and asked him straight up what he thought about it all. He laughed it off and admitted her attitude during the search totally shocked him too. Then he accused Jeffrey of trying to get him rejected on purpose, but Jeffrey swore she was just acting nervous. Frida pulled the blonde girl into a tight, supportive hug and whispered that they'd have a real girl talk about everything later. Frida ignored her friends and straight up asked Daichi if he thought she was cute, so he smiled and told her she's cute, but way cuter when she's all nervous like this, making her beg him to stop. He told everyone he was heading off to set up his shop and said they should totally stop by later. While he walked away, Jeffrey and the twin-tailed girl started cheering Karina on. She totally freaked out and yelled that they were dead wrong. Then she got all flustered and promised to talk later before telling them to just go have fun. As he wove through the crowded market, Daichi figured they only had about 2 hours left to get the job done. He was totally focused on how the villagers would react to his stall, while behind him, Karina was still freaking out over the teasing and yelling that they were only there to run a shop. The twin-tailed girl saw she was totally stressed and asked what was up, while Daichi looked at the small crowd and said it wouldn't be too crazy, but Karina just brushed it off and insisted she was totally fine. The girl wasn't buying it for a second, her eyes narrowing as she pushed for the truth, and Karina's panicked face totally blew her cover. Daichi steps in and tells the others to stay back while he gets the stall ready, reminding them they've only got 2 hours to get it done. He gives a quick shout to the old lady setting up her stall next door, asking if she's all ready to start the day. She tells him she's just testing the waters today before the big opening tomorrow. And as she starts pulling a mountain of gear out of a container, he's totally jealous that she has a magic item box. The old lady gives a knowing smirk and tells her young friend that the older you get, the more you'll seriously envy anyone who has an item box. He listens to them talk, and you can tell he's really starting to think about it. A light bulb goes off in his head, and he asks the ladies how they start their fires. And while the young girl is totally confused, the older woman says she just uses a flint like he does. The girl says she can use a little magic to get the job done, but she's super annoyed that real magic tools cost a total fortune. He jumps at the chance and asks if they'd be down to buy a super cheap tool that starts fires instantly without needing any magic at all. His offer leaves them totally confused, and the two vendors, an old lady and a younger one, just stare at him until the older woman finally asks. He asked to see her hands, pulled out a box of waterproof matches, and with one quick strike, a bright flame hissed to life. He hands the lit match to the shocked old lady, and she touches the flame to a weird spoon-shaped tool that catches fire instantly. The whole crowd is totally blown away, whispering about how he pumped his fist in total victory because his journey to become a merchant was finally starting. Right in the middle of the busy market, Daichi shouts that he's giving away more free waterproof matches, and a massive crowd instantly mobs him to see what the hype is about until he has. She points out a girl and explains his fire starters make lighting wood super easy, but only work once, and even though she nods, he can tell she doesn't really get the catch. She asks to borrow the matches, grabs the box, and with one quick strike, she sets the wood on fire. The whole crowd is freaking out, whispering about how he started that fire so easily without using any magic at all. Daichi takes his chance and holds up the matches, shouting that anyone can start a fire now, even if they don't have a single drop of magic. He drops the catch. These matches are one-time use and cost 2 silver coins for a box of 25, turning the crowd's hype into annoyed whispers about the price. He pulls out his next item, 60 fire starters for just 1 silver coin, and as the crowd goes wild, Daichi remembers that even the guild leader Klaus was just as shocked. He raises his gloved hand to the crowd with a cocky grin, asking them what they've finally decided. Suddenly, a woman with a headscarf steps up and announces she's buying both the matches and the fire starters, her voice totally silencing the whispering crowd. Daiichi takes the coin and thanks her, but before she can walk away, he stops her to say he's got something else to show her, and now she's totally curious about what else he's hiding. She's totally down and looks super hyped, so he explains these aren't for sale. They're actually free gifts he's tossing in if she buys something. She gives him the green light, so he grabs his gear and says that since he's starting early, he's going to hook his customers up with some extra bonuses. The crowd is totally stunned when he sets a grill over the hot coals and shows off rows of perfectly prepped meat skewers that are literally shining in the light. As the meat starts sizzling, a little girl asks what he's cooking, so he tells her it's grilled chicken made by cutting it into bite-sized pieces, putting them on skewers with some sauce, and roasting them right over the fire. He saw everything was going exactly according to plan. That delicious smell of grilled chicken started pulling in a huge crowd, making everyone who missed lunch literally drool. One guy even shouted that he'd eaten. He held up a steaming hot skewer and shouted to the girl who just bought some matches and fire starters from him. He was totally shocked, but offered her a free sample, and after making sure he was for real, she happily grabbed the skewer. Everyone held their breath as she took a bite, her eyes popped wide open, and she shouted that it was absolutely delicious. She shouted that it was the best thing she'd ever tasted, asking all about the sauce and if she could buy the skewers, while Daichi just smiled, totally hyped that she loved it. He grinned at the hyped-up crowd as everyone started yelling, asking if they could get a free skewer even if they only bought one box. He told them he had tons of chicken. The deal sent everyone into a total frenzy, leaving Daichi completely swamped as he tried to flip food and take cash from a massive line of people all by himself. He shouts to the massive crowd that he's closing up soon, telling everyone to grab their last-minute stuff after a super successful day. Just as the shop clears out, 3 scary dudes walk up, and their leader with the slicked-back hair stares Daichi down and demands a taste. Daichi doesn't even flinch and just tells them he's been waiting. He's actually super chill while explaining that he's totally sold out because business was way better than he thought. He totally ignores the angry crowd and tells the guys the shop is closed for the day, but they can just come back tomorrow if they're still down. He tries to say no politely, but the leader just laughs in his face, mocking him for being a bad businessman and saying they're going to teach him a lesson while his buddy in the helmet pulls. Before he can even move, this blonde girl named Karina jumps in front of the blade with her staff, looking totally serious as she tells them she's protecting him, and the guys are completely shocked. She stands her ground without flinching, and while the leader tries to act tough and tells her to move or get hurt, his buddy notices she's actually a B-rank mage and warns. He smirks and asks if a simple escort really thinks she can handle all 4 of them. But even when he warns her she'll regret it, she doesn't even look scared. The standoff gets interrupted by a random voice asking what's wrong, and the leader totally loses his cool, stuttering that they were just heading out because everything's sold out. 2 guys who look like they're in charge suddenly show up, and the leader, with a huge scar over his eye, just smirks while asking if they're starting a fight. The thugs jump back in total fear as the guy with the scar gets right in their faces, asking if they're starting a fight and if they need his help. He asks the leader what this fight is going to cost, then tells him straight up that these thugs are the ones who'll be paying for it. He turns to Daichi and Karina, saying they've had their fill and are out of supplies, so it's time to bounce. And Daichi doesn't waste a second agreeing. Just as Daichi tries to walk away, the thugs snap and turn their rage right toward him. The leader screams that he's been playing them for fools while his goons back him up. This massive, bald commander steps forward with those 2 guards from before, and they look so scary that the whole fight just freezes while Daichi and the blonde woman watch it all go down from the sideline. This guy with a goatee is getting super annoyed and asking what the holdup is, but Alicia Heartland is just grinning and holding Daichi's cat, Nike, making the kitty wave itself. Meanwhile, the thugs Daichi and Karina dealt with are back together and looking for revenge. Their leader is fuming because they looked like total idiots, and he says it's time to show those two. The laughing stops instantly when Karina points her finger with a dead serious look, snapping that it's no joke because the girl they're mocking is actually a B-rank mage, leaving their leader totally speechless. The rest of the thugs just keep laughing, acting like the warning didn't scare them at all. The leader just smirks and tells his crew to stay sharp, because she isn't the only mage they have to worry about. He gives the word, and the whole squad instantly gets a scary look in their eyes as they pull out their weapons, ready to show him exactly who he's messing with. As the thugs close in, Karina warns Daichi that 3 of them are mages, making him realize his normal bullets might be useless against their magic. But when she asks him to handle one side, he gets totally hyped because a pretty girl is finally counting on him. So he raises his gun and gives her a cool, "Roger that." He's totally sure he can handle both bosses, but Karina tells him to just pick one and wait for them to make the first move. The leader is totally fuming because they're acting so chill, and while he's screaming at them to explain themselves, 2 goons suddenly charge in with their weapons out before Daichi can even move. Just like that, the fight's over, and those 3 lead thugs are already face down in the dirt, getting absolutely wrecked before they could even land a single hit. The rest of the thugs just stand there in total shock, their confidence completely gone after seeing their bosses get wrecked in a split second. Karina doesn't even flinch as she looks at Daichi for an answer, but he just lets out a confused, "Huh," since even he's shocked by how things turned out. She looks down at the terrified leader shaking on the ground and asks him what she said earlier. Then, with a little smirk, she admits she totally forgot and asks if any of his guys remember. Daichi sees his chance and squats down in front of the beaten guy, making it clear he's about to grill him for some serious answers. He kicks off the interrogation by asking the leader if they're also there for the goblins, and while the guy sweats bullets with a fake smile, asking what he wants to know, Daichi just... The leader says his squad are all official Karam adventurers who signed up for the quest, but those mages over there definitely didn't. Daichi narrows his eyes and grills them, demanding to know the exact number of goblins they actually wiped out. The guy's cool act totally falls apart when he admits his squad got 0 points, and then another member nervously confesses they got nothing either, all while Daichi just watches them with a stone-cold expression. Then, he looks at a bald guy in a white cloak and brings up how the other group claimed they beat 11 people, which makes the dude totally flinch. Daichi grills the bald guy to make sure number 11 is the real deal, and after the nervous dude confirms it, Daichi demands he spill the beans on his whole squad. The guy starts acting nervous, so Alicia points to a dude in a bandana who might know more. But Daichi is done waiting and snaps, grabbing the bald man by his cloak to demand answers about this part. He listened as the guy in the cap explained their squad had 4 members, including one person who could use both water and healing magic. He kept going, explaining that the 2 frontliners had magic gear and the 4th member was an attack mage, but that was basically all they could do. He realized their team was actually stacked, which explains how they took down 11 goblins, but it's still super sus since every other group got totally wrecked. He tracked them to the village square and shouted to the crowd of adventurers, asking who took the Torino village goblin quest, and that's when the guy in the cap stepped up and pointed out his team. He got dead serious and asked if the village was hit, but the guy said no, explaining they'd hunted for goblins for over 10 days without finding a thing before finally giving up, which left him wondering how they even made it out without a single scratch. He wasn't satisfied and pushed for the exact timeline. So the guy explained that the mages arrived 3 days before the goblin attack, noting they were super lucky because being just a little late would. Once he pieced it all together, he crossed his arms and asked the group if they were the ones who fought the goblins. And the light-haired mage stared him down to ask just how big. The blonde mage keeps his cool and explains that since no one had seen a goblin in over 10 days, they figured the whole pack was on the move and headed straight into the deep woods to. Daichi takes it all in and asks if they even ran into a single goblin while they were looking. The mage just shuts his eyes and gives a cold, one-word answer, no. Everything goes dead quiet as Daichi and his crew trade looks, just trying to process the guy's cold rejection. Daichi breaks the silence and asks his team what to do with the guys, thinking that calling the guards is way too much work, and they should just let them go if they're actually sorry. The guys hear this and immediately start screaming these super fake apologies. They're shouting about how sorry they are and begging to leave, which totally catches Daichi's friends off guard. He makes his choice, grabs the ponytail warrior's shoulder, and tells the squad they've got to get this info to Klaus and Jeffrey right now. He thought about the mage's story, and while 4 mages hunting goblins in the woods sounded normal enough, his gut was screaming at him that these guys were bad news. One thing definitely felt off about this guy. He was talking way too much. Staring down at the mage, he started to wonder, was this finally a win? Or just another trap in his way? Inside the command tent, Klaus goes over the latest intel with Captain Jeffrey, noting that the same 2 adventurer groups from the goblin hunt were also in Torino village right before the bandits attacked, and then he asks the captain for his take on the whole situation. Jeffrey lays it out straight. He doesn't trust those 4 mages one bit and warns everyone to stay on guard because he thinks all these groups are just following a script to mess with them. Klaus sits back and realizes Lord Asakura was the one who got the scoop from the adventurers, while Karina points out that his food stall was definitely linked to everything that went down in Torino. He turns back to the captain for his take, and Jeffrey admits he was already planning to send a scout to the bars tonight, but Lord Asakura totally beat him to the punch. Karina hangs her head and apologizes, feeling totally guilty that she didn't stop him from being so blunt. Jeffrey tells her not to sweat it, since nobody could have guessed Asakura would open a shop just to spy on everyone. But then he asks Karina if she thinks they got caught acting suspicious. He points out how smart Asakura's questions were and warns them to watch for bandits on the road too, while Karina figures their secret is safe as long as the adventurers don't over. Klaus got the guild leader's attention back by asking her straight up what she thought of Lord Asakura. She got totally serious and stared off into the distance, telling him straight up that his potential is basically infinite. She explained it wasn't just his magic that was crazy, but his massive brain and wisdom were on a level she couldn't even wrap her head around. Boss agreed because he saw it too, remembering how Daichi crushed all that math in his head super fast and got every answer perfect without even using a pen. He even admitted that as a pro merchant, he was totally shocked by how fast Daichi could crush those tricky numbers and boring contracts. He remembered Daichi training in the woods, using crazy math equations and distance calculations that left the guild leader looking totally lost. He leaned in and asked if she remembered those equations, but the guild leader just shook her head because she totally blanked on the details. She keeps explaining how she used triangulation, and even though the numbers were just rough guesses, she felt like she was watching a genius professor because the math was way too insane for her to even follow. She explains that once he got bored of measuring things the old way, he whipped out this super weird gadget. It was crazy fast, perfectly accurate, and looked like something from the future. Klaus Bertram. He rubs his goatee while thinking it over, wondering if Daichi is actually a secret prince from another land or some top-tier noble. Result? Asterisk, but he immediately starts doubting himself, wondering out loud if Daichi is actually some rich heir or the second son of a powerful noble, even though he can't explain why he feels. He asks why she feels that way, and she straight up tells him that Daichi treats everything like a total joke. She calls him out for always rushing in without a plan, saying he's just trying to show off while everyone else is left to clean up his mess. She's not finished with her genius breakdown yet and is about to drop another huge point. She kept reporting to Klaus, saying they needed to level up how they treat Mr. Asakura, so Klaus leaned forward with his drink and asked her to explain exactly what she meant. She got super serious and told them they had to treat him like a secret king, or at least the heir to a massive, powerful family. He locked his fingers together with a totally blank face and quietly asked her to explain her reason. She explained that only the top-tier elites have both non-elemental magic and an item box, and while the box is cool, the quality of every single item inside is actually insane. She also said he's clearly super smart and knows exactly how to use his surroundings to handle any problem that comes his way. She pictured a total nightmare where all his OP gear ended up scattered across the entire country. She finally drops the bombshell. If Asakura is actually royalty from a kingdom with way better magic, his power would be totally off the charts, and Klaus just stands there realizing how big of a deal this really is. He stares her down and calls her out, saying she only wants Daichi to boost her family's power since she's the daughter of Count Kirsch. And Lady Karina is so shocked she starts. He just waved her off and said he was kidding, but she wasn't having it, snapping back that the mess the Neuendorf kingdom was in was way too serious for jokes. He agreed and got serious again, realizing that even if you ignore where Asakura is from, his gear and secrets are so valuable that both political sides would fight like crazy to get him on their team. She agreed and said, whoever snags him is going to be crazy powerful, but the real worry is if another country gets their hands on him first. Klaus made his choice and his eyes sharpened, announcing that they were going to treat Daichi Asakura with the absolute highest honor. Far away from all that royal drama, Daichi is just chilling in town with his crew when he asks Frida and Dennis why they're still following him. But Frida just smirks and asks if she's not good enough for him, making a flustered Daichi freak out before she laughs and says it's just way better to travel with friends you actually know. She started messing with Dennis next, joking that she'd kick him to the curb and find someone way hotter if Daichi wasn't happy, which made Dennis cringe and complain that she, Frida and Alicia, start messing with Daichi, and Frida jokes that he'd definitely rather hang out with her than some old dude, but he just pets his cat and tells them he's totally chill. Dennis is looking super awkward, while Karina explains their plan to fake being drunk and ambush the bandits, telling him to just relax, since even Mr. Asakura and his cat gave him the green light to party hard. She turns to Mr. Asakura and tells him that Dennis and Frida are B-rank mages who are total beasts at fighting both up close and from a distance. He realizes that a B rank means they're actually just as strong as Karina herself. He starts bragging about how awesome they are, but Frida points out that while Karina uses wind magic, she and Dennis are way better at blasting enemies with fire. Karina explains that every guard in Bertram is actually stronger than a D-rank mage, which is why she and Dennis feel like total nobodies, and Dennis just awkwardly agrees. He explains they're just faking being a normal group, making Daichi ask if the Bertram guards are actually weak, since he's not great at judging power levels. He listens as the blonde girl lays out the plan, explaining that Dennis can use his big area magic to cause a distraction so the rest of them can bolt while the enemy is busy. He realizes the plan is actually super basic and feels a bit bummed that Dennis is only there to help them bail. Frida's all smiles as she agrees with that, while Dennis looks totally drained and admits they hit the nail on the head. The blonde lady shuts down the convo and says that's enough chatting as they finally stop in front of a tavern. They're standing right in front of the building when Nike suddenly starts freaking out, meowing and squirming around in his arms. The little girl notices her freaking out and asks Daichi if Nike just hates being in a tavern. He pulls the cat close and gets totally serious, realizing Nike used her spirit magic to sniff out those thugs from earlier. And even though the blonde girl thinks it's just a hunch, Daichi is... Dennis ignores his cat's warning and pushes everyone to go inside, while the blonde woman is just relieved because she thinks taking down those adventurers will be a total breeze. The inside of the tavern is pure chaos, packed with people eating, drinking, and shouting at the top of their lungs. The whole squad hangs back at the entrance, carefully peeking into the crowded room to check out the scene from a safe distance. The blonde woman narrows her eyes and scans the crowd with super sharp focus. She finally tracks them down and whispers that she's found them, while Nike watches from Daichi's shoulder. Across the room, a bunch of scary-looking thugs are hanging out, and most of them are covered in fresh bandages from a recent beatdown. Tai Chi pulls Nike close and notices their wounds are still healing, while the girl with the twin tails calls Nike a total genius, and Frida brags about how easy it was to track them down. He thinks about his own crazy healing speed. It takes him less than 3 minutes to fully recover. The blonde woman mentions that the enemies had a water mage with them. Their wounds should have been... They realized they can totally scrap the plan to sit around faking drinks until the targets show up. Dennis, one of the targets, just slumps over and starts whining because there isn't any alcohol around. His friend Frida teases him, saying he could just go grab a drink outside. That idea gets them moving, and the whole group stands up and heads for the door. As they leave the village, Daichi wonders why they're heading into the creepy woods so late at... The blonde woman watches them head out, figuring they won't need to go deep into the woods just for a quick meeting. She thinks they're just meeting a contact or swapping letters, but Daichi just smirks because he knows they're actually heading back to report that the Bertram guards were way tougher than... He and his squad stay low in the bushes to follow the guys, and the blonde girl uses her wind magic to spy on their convo, where one man admits that even though the last fight wasn't crazy hard, those enemies were actually way stronger than they expected. The twin-tailed girl overhears their conversation and suddenly shouts that the men have already spotted people hiding in the grass. The whole group is starting to panic, and while the twin-tail girl whispers that things are looking bad, Daichi charges through the bushes to make sure they don't lose the sound of those men heading deeper into the forest. He asks the blonde girl for the scoop, and she tells him those guys somehow found out about the village watch. The voices get way clearer as these guys spin a fake story about hunting goblins to trick the village guards. And it's actually working because one of the watchmen is totally letting his guard down. One guy asks how strong these goblins actually are, and the answer is they're only a threat in big groups, so even low rankers can handle them as long as As Daichi listens to their plan, everything finally clicks, and he totally gets what they're up to. If a massive wave of goblins shows up, the kingdom is going to send in their... He finally figures it out. There aren't nearly enough goblins to need this many fighters, so the whole thing is just a distraction to keep the village guards busy. This move feels like total déjà vu, taking him right back to that mess in Torino. He maps out the whole evil plan. First, they use goblins to scare the village into calling for help. Then bandits sneak into the hero teams to spy. And once they know the place is, while he's still processing the shock, Frida comments on how wild things are getting. And Daichi explains that the thugs have new orders to leave the Bertram company alone and attack the other side. A girl with twin tails asks if the thugs realize they're walking into a trap, but Frida says they're just being super careful. The girl turns to the blonde woman, Karina, and asks to listen in, and Karina's like, "Yeah, I'll see what I can do." Suddenly, static blasts right into Daichi's ear, sounding like a creepy, glitched-out whisper. He heard a bandit freak out, reporting that the Bertram convoy had completely stopped in the village, and the local guards were acting super suspicious, exactly like they expected. The bandit leader's voice suddenly cuts in, demanding to know why the Bertram company is even stopping at the village, and while Daichi is still processing that, Karina totally shocks him by revealing she's using wind magic to eavesdrop on their whole conversation. The boss kept talking through the magic link, guessing the convoy got spooked by the Torino attack, while another bandit, who'd never heard the name, asked what he was talking about. Back with the group, Karina confirmed that Torino was definitely the last village those bandits raided. The leader's creepy voice echoed in Daichi's head, reminding him that Torino was the same village where they wiped out everyone. One guy snapped and told everyone to stop whining and just give him the plan, but the leader didn't care at all, saying they'd only be in trouble if the Bertram company stayed put. The leader just smirked and said the company showing up was actually a win, because with the guild leader there too, they were going to get an even bigger payday than last time. His crew started cheering like crazy, but the spies hiding in the shadows looked totally stressed as they caught every single word. He totally killed the vibe by warning Frida that the convoy's security was actually insane. The bandage guy who actually fought them backed it up, admitting that even though he only faced two, they were absolute beasts, while another bandit tried to act tough and asked if those two were the only real threat. The leader just flashed a scary, predatory grin and laughed, asking what the big deal was, since the report said their enemy was only an 8B rank mage. He looked super confident as he showed off their insane power, revealing they had 5 B rank mages ready to fight. The secret watchers were absolutely shook, their faces turning pale as they finally realized just how insane this power really was. Aichi is sweating bullets, wondering just how strong these guys really are, and the blonde woman beside him looks totally grim because they've finally met an enemy who's just as powerful as they are. You can practically feel the sparks in the air as Daichi stares down the group of bandits, realizing they're only acting this cocky because they've actually got the power to back it up. Captain Jeffrey is watching the whole thing go down from a safe spot and tells everyone they should wait for the bandits to move, and when he's asked if he's actually scared, he's actually shocked by how blunt he just was, and looks over with a confused face to see what they're thinking. He explains why he's being so careful, saying that while the blonde lady was strong and easy to read, that kid with her was a total wild card, with magic he couldn't even wrap his head around. He explains the attack, remembering how the kid blasted a chunk of lead straight into his leg, while Daichi wonders if that's really just earth magic. The blonde woman is shocked he actually broke through her magic armor, saying it's super rare to find anyone with that kind of crazy power. Over with the bandits, the boss finds out Akim and Elmer also lost their legs to that same kid, but he's convinced his men just got caught off guard. He just scoffs, thinking these guys are total weaklings who aren't even worth his time. The girl with the cool, dark hair next to him definitely feels the same way. Then, meanwhile, Daichi Asakura is meeting with Captain Jeffrey and the blonde woman, telling them he'll give his final answer tomorrow at noon, but they better pray the whole thing gets cancelled. As he heads out, the blonde woman looks at her armored partner with a serious face and just says, "Let's go." They're tearing through the tall grass, making it rustle like crazy. The trail leads them away from the fields and right toward a dark cave entrance hidden deep in the woods. Right after the order was given, a huge group of them marched straight into the dark cave and vanished into the shadows. Deep in the dark underground, a crew of scary villains is waiting, including a tough bald guy with a goatee and a massive wolf man. He asks his subordinate if those mages were really just B rank, and the guy in the turtleneck confirms Alan's team got destroyed, admitting that Kid and the female guard totally freaked him out. Their leader Joseph notices the commotion, so one of the guys who just got wrecked steps up and warns him that even though the girl is a B-rank mage, the dude she's with is a masked guy in a hood thinks their targets might be from the Bertram company, which would be a total disaster, but the bandits below are still acting tough because they have way more fighters. But not everyone is feeling that brave. One bandit laughs it off, bragging that they have a B-rank mage on their side too. This totally triggers the turtleneck guy, but when Joseph slams his hand down with a loud crack and yells for everyone to shut up, making the whole room go dead silent as they wait for his next move. Suddenly, a calm voice breaks the silence as this guy Peter, just chilling on a barrel, points out that the Bertram company definitely isn't going to ignore the village watch. They look Joseph right in the eye with a smirk, like they know exactly what's up. The bandit leader's eyes go wide as he finally gets what Peter is hinting at. He just smirks and tells them they've got it all wrong, because a good guy, like the guild leader, is definitely working with the guards to set a massive trap. Joseph turns to his squad and drops the intel, confirming that the guards are totally distracted at the north gate while the Bertram company is camped out in a clearing right by the south gate. Peter's all smiles as he breaks down the plan. If they jump the village guards from the north, the Bertram convoy will be forced to rush in to help. And the bald bandit Joseph thinks it over and drops a new plan. Just wreck the village guards and loot the place fast, because even if the payout is smaller, they'll be out of there before their enemies arrive. He gets this super greedy look, bragging that there are plenty of girls in the village, so he's going to take his sweet time. He's sure they'll just win like they always do. He starts seeing the massive holes in his plan and realizes they're walking straight into a trap, because if the guards called for backup early, there are probably enemy squads waiting to jump them from every side, making it impossible to loot the place while fighting off a whole army. While their leader is low-key stressing, the rest of the bandits are totally clueless and hyped to attack early, bragging about how they're gonna swipe all the village's cash and the convoy's loot for a massive payday. Back at the hall, the bandits are starting to panic because they know the Bertram convoy is terrifying. But Peter stays totally calm, thinking that B-rank mage is just going to be a total pain. Joseph ignores the freakout and turns to Peter, the only chill guy there, asking for his take instead of letting the fear that spooked Alan's scouts get to him. Peter tells the crew that Joseph is right about the Bertram convoy's scary reputation, so their main goal is to avoid a direct fight and keep everyone alive. He keeps his eyes locked on them, insisting that the only way this plan works is if they hit him with a total surprise attack. He stops and looks at his team, getting ready to break down the whole master plan. Peter suddenly gets all hyped up and explains his plan. The north side is guarded by the village watch, and while the bandits could totally crush them in a fair fight, it'll take way too long if the guards just hide inside. So, Peter suggests they just ignore the watch and raid the village instead, which another bandit loves because it'll force the guards to come running out to save everyone, walking right into a perfect ambush. His fake smile drops, and he lets out a tired sigh. Peter calls them out for making a huge mistake. They keep assuming the enemy is just going to do what they want. He warns them Joseph laid out the plan to crush the village guards and then hit the main camp, but Peter snapped, calling them all idiots for even thinking about splitting up their squad. He warned that making that move would just let the guards set up their defense, giving the Bertram convoy time to back up the villagers in the center, and that wasn't even the only danger. Joseph wasn't buying it, so he suggested a way easier plan. Just ignore the guards, raid the empty houses for loot, and bail before the convoy even shows up. He just laughed at Peter's warnings, calling him a coward for thinking their guys would get too distracted by loot to escape in time. Joseph busts out laughing and asks who could be that brain-dead, and his guys all join in. But Peter just looks away in total disappointment because those are the exact people he's worried about. President Joseph didn't even sweat it, saying they'd leave zero evidence behind. But Peter asked what happens if the villagers already bailed with all their loot. So the new plan was, he warned them that attacking from the south meant crashing straight into the convoy, which would be a way more brutal fight than anything the village guards could handle. He looks the bandit boss right in the eye and drops a way better plan. Forget a fair fight and just hit them with a surprise attack instead. That idea totally fired him up, and he jumped to his feet with a huge grin, shouting that he and the bandits were actually planning the exact same ambush, while Joseph just stood there completely speechless. He wasted no time breaking down the plan to the confused bandits, telling them they had to act like the village was guarded by two separate squads, one in the south and another right in the center. He drew a quick map in the dirt and laid it all out. The real goal was to wreck the village guards and crush everyone's hope, so they'd only have to deal with the bandit leader shut him down and called him a total idiot, arguing the real loot was with the main convoy. So Joseph planned to crush the Bertram unit first, to leave the villagers defenseless before any knights could show up. He wrapped things up by saying the whole point of the sneak attack was just to wipe out the village watch, and to him, it was the perfect, simple plan. Peter looked back from a distance with a huge smirk and shouted, "Bingo!" making Joseph's heart sink as he realized the plan he just explained was a total fake. So he demanded to know if Peter smirks and starts laying out the real plan, and the bandit leader is totally hooked, leaning in to hear more. Somewhere else, a hand slams down on a table with a loud bang that rings through the entire room. Klaus Bertram is absolutely fuming, glaring straight ahead with a look of total rage on his face. He's breaking down the chaos in a super tense meeting, explaining how the bandit raid on Torino village and the goblin cleanup have totally ruined their original plan. He lays out the plan. First, they're going over what they've found, then figuring out how to keep spying, because he's terrified that if the village council takes over, they'll just hand all their secrets straight to the enemy. While he's stressing out, Daiichi cuts in to ask if the council actually went for their plan, and he confirms they already met with the Takura town hall to lock down the village. The plan is set. The village watch and the goblin hunters are holding down the north gate, while the Bertram company stays on high alert at the south gate to protect the convoy. The plan is set, and the main squad is camping out right in the middle of the village so they can rush to either gate or shut down any bandits trying to climb over the walls from any side. Klaus explains that his company came up with this plan to keep the damage as low as possible. They're moving everyone near the south gate into the middle of the village for now. Any sketchy... Daiichi listens to the plan and realizes Klaus is actually right, but Jeffrey just smirks and tells him not to sweat it since they're leading the charge and taking all the heat. Alicia keeps it real and says, since it's their plan, they've got to be the ones on the front lines, especially since the council has no backup and the village is basically defense. Now that they're done talking, Daiichi says it's time to go see the guild leader, and Alicia's totally down, as they head out. They link up with the main squad just as Klaus Bertram gives the final order, and with everyone sticking to the plan, the whole team turns together and gets ready to roll. Right as they're heading out, Daiichi looks totally locked in while going over the plan to hit the south with Alicia, Karina, Dennis, Frito, and guild leader Klaus. With the counterattack finally ready, Captain Jeffrey got his orders to park his squad right in the middle of the village so they could jump into the action wherever they were needed. Back in his tent, Daichi was stressing about the next fight, worried that the enemy's magic would be way too strong for his basic weapon to handle. He knew he couldn't just start blasting since he couldn't tell who the mages were, so he realized he was going to need some massive anti-material rifles to get the job done. While he's cooking up his plan, his cat Nike starts meowing for attention, and he realizes that since mages still need to breathe, he can just knock them out with gas, spray the rest with an assault rifle, and snipe any survivors with his heavy anti-material rifle before jokingly asking Nike if she wants to play with the... His good mood gets totally wrecked when a voice starts crackling through a nearby radio. The message confirms his worst nightmare. The whole plan they've been following is a total fake. The voice on the